Hey, sovereign wealth builders, Simon Dixon here, and welcome to another episode of Simon Dixon Hard Talk Live. If you were on Bitcoin FinTwit, then you would have known that the story around Jane Street price manipulation really blew up the social media and the X platform. So there was so much misinformation, disinformation, and also some revelations. And you know how I do things. I don't do hype. I don't do half truths. I do the truth as I see it. So we're going to be digging deep. And you know that I don't do propaganda. And you know that I don't do things in half measures. So we're going to be understanding the different operations from both a macro geopolitical perspective and how it relates to the Bitcoin price suppression operations. And we're going to be answering the questions of the most commonly held accusations, and we're going to be going through it. So you know that if you are a long-term listener of Simon Dixon Hard Talk Live, that we've been talking about the Wall Street attack vector and how the price has been under siege as a result of the construction of financial weapons of mass destruction by the proof of weapons network, particularly in the financial industrial complex. So we're going to be diving deep into all of that today. The main episode is called Bitcoin Under Siege. We're going to be going through price suppression. We're going to be going through the Jane Street accusations. And we're also going to be going through more revelations around developer infiltration. In fact, revelations that nobody has discussed. I reached out to my early contacts in Bitcoin, and we're going to be going through that. So we're going to be breaking a lot of that today on Simon Dixon Hard Talk Live. We're going to break this down into two parts, and we're going to jump right in very soon. Part one, we're going to be discussing Jane Street, and we're going to be discussing its war on the Bitcoin price and the accusations. And then once we've covered that thoroughly from the perspective of the main accusations, as well as the different types of operations to put this in context of the wider geopolitical issues and wars that we're experiencing right now, in part two, I'm going to be interviewing Amir Taaki, and we're going to be revealing his actual contact with Jeffrey Epstein, what he revealed about people that actually went to the Epstein Island. And we're also going to be talking about his perspective and my perspective on different Bitcoin developer infiltration attempts. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. And without further ado, let's go right through the main content, which is part one. Jane Street's attack on the price of Bitcoin. Right. So as I said, there were lots of allegations. And if you were on Twitter or X, you would have seen them. And they went viral and everyone was just copying and pasting each other's accusations. It really kicked off with Jason Belcher's article, where he really dug deep into the Jane Street accusations and laid the framework for some of the things that I'm going to be discussing here today. But we've had a little bit of time to look into it. And this is going to be an ongoing thing, of course, we're going to be discussing. So let's go through the different types of secret trading techniques that basically the allegations were that they would use these secret trading techniques in order to oppress the price of Bitcoin. Now, because Wall Street has constructed these different Bitcoin derivative complex, Bitcoin treasury companies, Bitcoin ETFs, and the whole complex that I've been warning people about, including the Bitcoin treasury companies, the accusation was that Jane Street has been accumulating Bitcoin shares, i.e. ETFs, and then been using them to dump them in seconds to crash the price. So they would buy them in a very managed way. They would dump them very, very quickly in order to crash the price. And then they would profit from shorts that they would put. And they would do those shorts through some of the derivatives. And so they'd use an arbitrage, essentially derivative contracts and Bitcoin ETF. And because they have special advantages in terms of access to ETFs that we're going to be covering today, that would be the mechanism by which they could actually cause the price to crash, because they're able to effectively, in a short time zone, naked shorts. Naked shorting, for those not familiar, it means if you want to go short and profit from a stock price going down, you need to borrow somebody else's stock, and there's a whole stock lending industry out there with prime brokerage and investment banks. And if you're like a high net worth individual or an institution, you get access to prime brokerage services where you can borrow these stocks with the hope that you'll be able to buy it back cheaper later if the price goes down, and then you can settle that stock. And so the person on the other side that has stock that wants to hold it long term, they receive an interest rate for lending you their stock, and you effectively profit if the price goes down, but the longer term investor doesn't really care because he's just going to be holding it for the long term, and then will receive some interest that they can use in order to accumulate more Bitcoin shares. And so there was another accusation that every single day at approximately 10 a.m., there would be a manipulation, and it would be an algorithmic manipulation. And we saw this because there is a case in India where Jane Street is basically under attack by the regulator. And we were wondering whether the same thing has been happening here. And so Jane Street made approximately $4.23 billion. Not sure that will net out to after cost and all of their interest and all the various other hedging costs. While it led to a temporary ban by the securities regulator in India and the Exchange Board of India in order to ban Jane Street from performing such activities. So there is a regulatory intervention, not inside the US, but outside the US. And we also saw similar things that were alleged in both China and South Korea. And so outside of US, there has been such allegations, which has led to a ban. Now, whether those are still bans or not, and what the outcome is a little bit uncertain. But we know that there has been regulatory bans. And so what is the allegation? What is the exact mechanism for oppressing and manipulating the price of Bitcoin? So Jane Street, as one of the most profitable institutions, as a private company, it's not a public company, so there's no disclosure other than what it needs to disclose as a private entity. It is also constructed opaquely as a partnership. And so in order to become a partner of Jane Street, we don't know exactly how that works. But the assumption is you have to bring a lot of money with you. And so it is an elite club that effectively, remember we talked about compromise networks, that you can probably compromise your way into if you hang around in these elite wealthy circles. And so there's no accountability to outside investors. I'm assuming it's proprietary trading. So it's the house trading its own book, and it has insider access to pipelines of the financial plumbing that other people don't have access to. So its history has been one of accusations around high frequency trading and various other things. But so the first step is to have billions of dollars, and most people don't have billions of dollars, and they have access to it as well because it's their proprietary money. The second accusation is that they would then buy spot Bitcoin, so they could buy it on an exchange. So let's say they got an account with Coinbase, they can buy spot Bitcoin. They will buy it at approximately, let's just say $68,000. I believe the live price right now is about $64,000. We've had a bit of a correction. So they will buy spot Bitcoin, and then they would open massive shorts via these options or various other derivatives. And so the money needed to purchase the spot is unleveraged, but the money on the derivatives is leveraged and done through derivatives. So if the price goes down, they make a lot more money while losing money on the spot long purchase, but making more money on the short trade. And so then they would sell large amounts of Bitcoin in minutes in a very, very quick period of time via algorithms. And then they would combine this with low liquidity moments when liquidity is the lowest. And they would also combine it with FUD campaigns, fear, uncertainty, doubt, negative news, and they would trigger surprise selling. So, for example, you could coordinate it with the release of a campaign to say that Bitcoin was created by Jeffrey Epstein, for example. Or you could coordinate it with a campaign that old school Bitcoiners are selling their Bitcoin. And then maybe this crashes the price in that moment to approximately $62,000. So you got a $6,000 hedge or profit that you've made on your short derivatives. You then offset the long position, the loss you've made on the spot. And you would then close your shorts for a very large profit if you could do it at scale. And so you're just losing about 5% on the spot, but you're making significantly more on the derivatives trade. Then what you would do is you would effectively repurchase the Bitcoin spot again at the $62,000, and you would squeeze the shorts, and you'd create some kind of FOMO campaign, fear of missing out campaign, in order to push the price higher. So you're adding to your Bitcoin position, and you're crashing the price as it goes down. And so with your profits, you're ending up with more and more Bitcoin, and you're able to take more and more Bitcoin out of the market from those that are panic selling on the news. Now, remember, if you watched my interview last week, I was sharing my experience as a market maker. These are the exact type of things that we would do when we're ended up in these naked short position. And then we would go to the compliance back office and they had to go find the trade. And we would run these long-term naked short positions. And you could do that because as a market maker that was my job. You don't get the same level of disclosures because your commitment is always to have a bid and an offer at the same time. Now, when you combine that with large proprietary traders like Jane Street, and they make sure that they get certain access, these operations are possible. And so they can then open a massive short position again as the price is going down. And then they can just rinse and repeat and do this time and time again. This is basically what they were doing, or the accusations are around what Jane Street was doing in India with certain stocks. And through this mechanism, they basically had $560 million frozen, and it's held in a escrow account with the Indian regulator, the SEBI. And the manipulation case is basically ongoing as we speak right now. And I said, there is different cases in China, in South Korea, but nothing in America. We had to wait for a lawsuit. So the question that we're attempting to answer today is there something about Jane Street that makes it not under investigation in the US when it is under investigation in other countries? That would imply that there is some kind of connection to a higher level at the financial industrial complex. And remember, the financial industrial complex has access to military industrial complex, which is subordinate to it, which also has the quote unquote deep state, MI6, Five Eyes, Mossad, CIA operations. And so through these different blackmail operations, if you are in that class of the financial industrial complex, then you may be able to get special protections. And therefore, you could be a part of covert operations from those where the government is subordinate to them. So we're going to look into that today. And I'm going to share never shared stories that I was actually saving for a book that I was writing as some of these operations were happening as well. I dug it out, and we're going to be pulling some of these things together. And then the second thing I'm going to be asking is, if they have a higher level of protection, are they able to short-term and long-term oppress the price of Bitcoin? And what does that mean for us? More importantly, there's no good understanding this stuff if you can't do anything with it. So I'm going to end with exactly what you can do with it. And then we'll move over to part 2, where we'll be going through some of the other operations like developer infiltration and various other things. So who is Jane Street? Well, it is in fact the most profitable trading firm on earth, as far as we know. Unless there's some covert one we don't know about, and there very well may be, but the most profitable trading firm that we know of on earth. In 2025, its performance was $24 billion trading revenue in just the first 9 months of 2025. $25 billion. That's $10.1 billion in Q2 2025 alone. So what happened in Q2 2025? How does that relate to some of the things? Well, we'll look into that. But that is the largest quarterly trading revenue ever recorded on Wall Street history that I'm aware of. That is more trading revenue than Goldman Sachs in basically a comparable period in its comparable proprietary trading department since the Glass-Steagall Act has broken down and they were able to, separate out commercial banking, retail banking, investment banking, wealth management, and proprietary trading. Proprietary trading is where you're trading the house's money, as opposed to an asset manager that is managing other people's money and therefore has much greater fiduciary duties. And so this is a level of black box that we saw during the infamous first bailout of long-term capital management. A hedge fund, a market maker, a proprietary trader, an interdealer broker that has all of these different plumbings and access to high-frequency trading. It was actually had larger revenues than JP Morgan's trading division in the same quarter as well. So this is the top of the top. This is the creme de la creme. And it's been responsible, allegedly, from the data that I could find, for 10% of all North American equity trading volume. So 10% of all the volume in the most liquid market in the world in equity trading in America. Now, what else do they play in? Well, they are completely dominant in the ETF market. And by market, I mean market making. I described last week in my interview what I used to do as a market maker. Effectively, you make a market. And you use all the tools that you're allowed to use in order to make those market. They also have a global quantitative trading powerhouse. So they have access to very high levels of algorithms. Perhaps they're using access to Aladdin data, which is BlackRock's artificial intelligence. They have a derivatives infrastructure firm. So they actually are involved in the infrastructure of some of these constructing these structured products. Whether they do them in-house or they do them in partnership with various investment banks is very opaque. But most importantly, it's a private company with very little disclosure requirements, and they have a very big hidden element to them. So this implies that there is a level of protections. As a market maker, we were able to do things that normal market participants aren't able to do. That's because Jane Street is what is called an authorized participant. And where are they an authorized participant? So when you apply to have a Bitcoin ETF, you need to have somebody, an external party, managing, so whenever you buy shares in a Bitcoin ETF, it has to be backed by the underlying. But every 24 hours that settles, and there is a settlement process where there may be more shares than there is underlying Bitcoin. And so you need one of these appointed participants in order to manage that in an independent fashion. And so where is Jane Street an appointed participant? Well, they're an appointed participant in much of the ETF plumbing. The ETF is the exchange traded funds, because you want to have access to an asset class without buying spot Bitcoin, which is actual Bitcoin. And you want to do it within your 401k, your retirement fund, or your brokerage account. You do it via an exchange traded fund. Their job is to give you a share that represents Bitcoin. And then they go and hold the Bitcoin in custody. And they work with these appointed, these authorized participants in order to make sure that that's always matching up. But there's always a delay and a lag where you could end up with more shares than Bitcoin. Does that create an exploit? Well, let's look at the founders and who's actually involved in it. It is very, very opaque. So we know that Jane Street's founder is a guy called Robert Graneri. And so being stereotypical, and sorry, it sounds like an Italian name to me, but he's accidentally there was an interesting story when I was doing some research for this story. I was like, what can we do that makes us understand whether there is any deep state connections? And so we always follow the money. Now, I did find one particular transaction. It's not damning in itself, but it starts to paint a story. Because the founder, Robert, he accidentally wired, I found a transaction, $7 million for basically purchases of AK-47s in order to do a Stinger missile operation of RPGs on purchases for basically a resistance and a coup and an overthrow of the South Sudan government. Now, we've covered Sudan many times on SimonDixonHardTalk, and you can go to my blog and find that. But essentially, you have a coup, you have an internal conflict, you have RSF, which is a force that's backed by UAE, and you have another force, which is SDF, which is basically backed by Saudi Arabia and Egypt. But it was an internal struggle from CIA covert operations historically. Now, I believe that after we resolve and America exits the Middle East, we're going to have resolutions around that because we're going to be handing over some of these covert operations. I won't go too deep into that. But it went to the South Sudan government. It didn't go to the South Sudan government. It led to the coup forces to overthrow the South Sudan government. Now, he says that he thought it was some kind of humanitarian aid contribution. And we know organizations like CIA fronts, like USAID, National Endowment of Democracy, are utilized in order to exert some of these covert operations. And we know that elite billionaires are used if they have special access to certain bank accounts like BCCI, JP Morgan accounts, the Vatican bank accounts, some of these Swiss bank accounts like Credit Suisse, that they are often put into these leverage compromise games where they have to contribute. So the coup essentially it implies that it could have been some kind of federal asset here. And it is possible. It's not conclusive, but it paints a bit of a story. What else does point a story? So whenever, I used to run a regulated financial institution. I also used to work in investment banking. And whenever there is suspicious transactions, you have to file suspicious activity reports. But what's interesting in this one, we don't know whether there was a SAR filed. We wouldn't get transparency on that. But there were no charges. And basically, he just went back to trading afterwards, and the founder did that. So I asked the question, could Jane Street be an intelligence front for covert financial industrial complex operations? Now, if you're a long-term listener or you're new, this may be a little bit overwhelming for you to, take in. But I wanted to just make sure that you understand this. So I'll catch you up. We cover every single week the different operations that happen, and we follow the money so that we're not listening to the media, so that we can forecast geopolitical events, macro events, and also how we protect ourselves at the micro level, given all this transition to a world of AI, central bank digital currencies, and stable coins, and various other things. So are these, I call the financial industrial complex a FIC, are these fixed operations, are they above the law? Because we know that there are operations that are above the law. And so I'm just going to cover 3 operations before we go deep into the Jane Street and then the particular allegations around silver and Bitcoin so that we can dig deep as well. So just so that you're up to date and you understand how these operations work, I'm just going to go based upon previous discussions, 3 quick operations. I want to remind you, we've covered it many times or historically on SimonDixonHardTalk, the LIBOR scandal. And so the LIBOR scandal, for anyone that doesn't know, is the London Interbank Offered Rate. Effectively, it's a benchmark interest rate that was used by banks disclosing the rates at which they were lending each other and doing different operations. And they would take an average rate of all these major global banks And when they were borrowing funds from each other, or they were writing various derivatives contracts, or engaging in foreign currency exchanges, they would publish all this information to LIBOR, and the average would be set, and this would make a rate. And that LIBOR rate in London was very important. Now, it was very scandalous at the time once there was a whole revelation. But it was administered by the British Bankers Association, the BBA in the UK. And it became essentially the reference rate. This is why it's so important. For if you were taking out a large corporate loan as a large, corporation, LIBOR would be used in order to set the rate. It would be an amount above LIBOR. It would also set the rate of adjustable mortgages. So in the case of the UK, you tend to get 2 years where you can fix the interest rate on your mortgage, and then you have a 30-year mortgage, which is adjustable rate. And so your interest and your mortgage repayment and the rate that you pay would be based upon LIBOR. It also set a part of the derivatives complex. So when large financial institutions are looking to swap their exposure to different currencies, they would take out interest rate swaps. And LIBOR would be used in both currency swaps and interest rate swaps in order to set and fix some of those interest rates into longer term loans and products. It also was a vital part of the euro dollar futures, which is the plumbing between the European and American relationship, where European banks get to create euro dollars, and then they use these futures contracts in order to increase the amount of dollars within the European banking sector. All combined, it is basically trillions and trillions of dollars of contracts executed through derivatives globally. The entire derivatives market, some estimate, is many multitudes greater than the entire GDP and entire debt of the world economy. Some estimate it to be like a $600 trillion market. But we don't know, because a lot of them are black box over-the-counter contracts. And so we don't even really have this data. And so at the time, the controversy was that we were told that these are regulated institutions and the regulators have got taken care of it. But within all of these banks, they would have internal traders, and those internal traders would provide the data. The data would be provided to the British Bankers Association, then the BBA would publish it, and then it would be used as the LIBOR rate that would set many of these contracts. And so the banks realized that they could just act as a cartel, and they could have, take some of these hard and large derivative positions and manipulate LIBOR. And just quite frankly, lie about the data by manipulating some of these positions. And so what they would do, it was found through emails at the highest level of reporting, through a plausible deniability exercise, they would request their colleagues within the bank to submit LIBOR to slightly higher rate, up or down, depending on the coordinated goal across this cartel. And so that some small basis points would basically change almost, billions and billions and millions of dollars of profit and loss for these banks. And so leading up to the global financial crisis, you could use this in order to hide some of the exposure and make the banks look more solvent than they actually were. Now, the banks didn't really care about the global financial crisis because they'd fully co-opted the government, they'd co-opted the Fed, they co-opted the central banks, and they were able to just socialize the losses, privatize the gain, and concentrate their power in the end. But banks were fined for this operation and this behavior. They were fined. The banks that were fined were Barclays in the UK, UBS in Switzerland, RBS in the UK, Deutsche Bank in Germany, JP Morgan in the US, Citibank in the US, and Rabbit other ones as well. And so both transatlantic, UK, European, American cartel of banks, that many of them are the shareholders in the Federal Reserve System, and those central banks would be connected into the Bank for International Settlements as well. Now, the total fines exceeded approximately $9 billion globally, but they made significantly more out of it. So all this to say is that there are opaque practices within the higher levels of the financial industrial complex that allows for this internal plumbing. And also, we've seen many revelations within the high frequency trading environment where regulators just can't really keep up with this stuff. And then if you have higher level of intelligence protections, you're able to make those problems go away, or you can just pay the fine and do the crime, and it makes more money. First operation. Going to go through two more as well, just to make sure you understand that these things happen all the time. If you haven't been watching, you would have known, if you're a long-term listener, that we've been sharing what we think will happen next in Iran. And we were talking about Operation Ajax. Now, we had a confirmation from Scott Bessent, who's the Commerce, I think he's the Treasury Secretary under the Trump administration right now, used to work for George Soros and was managing the crash of the pound during the euro-pound crisis as well. And I believe has been brought in order to do multiple currency operations and covert operations, as well as strategically weaken the dollar for the financial industrial complex, my long-term thesis that I think we're seeing. Now, Scott Bessent, on an interview, recently confirmed that they have been destroying the Iranian currency leading up to the protests. And so all of those protests, which had Mossad infiltration as well, were a currency war. And this is what's always happened. This has always happened across the Dutch Empire, the British Empire, the American Empire, preceding a government overthrow, and some of these operations as well. And so the original one was done by MI6 and CIA to replace the democracy in Iran with a dictatorship, and to install the Shah so that essentially Iran's oil would be used for British petroleum and later American interests. And that built up to everything that's happening today. But it was originally called Operation Ajax, and recently we had Operation Ajax 2.0. And Scott Bessent effectively confirmed that they did a covert currency war on the Iranian currency to destroy the savings of average Iranian, create an inflationary cycle, and also increase the price of goods and destroy people's savings so that they could agitate civil unrest as part of these operations. So the question is, when Scott Bessent does this at the government level, who sits above? Because who's going to benefit from Iran and all of their resources? Well, of course, it's the financial industrial complex, which also has access to military industrial complex, technical industrial complex, deep state operations, and through lobby are able to determine and set government policy. And so they need partners within hedge funds in order to execute these operations. So what banks did they use in order to make these transactions? And what hedge funds did they use, and what derivative products were used? All open questions. We don't have the answers to that. We know who they used in previous operations. And so my assumption is that these operations still exist today, obviously. Now, the third operation, I just want to help you understand because it relates to things that are happening today. And then we're going to go deep into Jane Street, silver, Bitcoin, and then what you can actually do as well. The third operation, if you haven't researched it, is the infamous Iran-Contra affair. So Khamenei, I always get confused. Khamenei was the previous supreme leader in Iran. Now you have Khamenei. Khamenei was brought in because he had exile within France. And they were working on their nuclear program, between France, Israel, Iran, various other things. But during and leading up to that Iranian revolution, you had Khamenei come into power. Some people speculate, because he was in exile in France, that there may have been some covert operations. And we have seen with Iran-Contra affair that at times Iran, Israel, and the US have worked together in various operations. And one of those operations was the Iran-Contra affair. And this is all documented history. And basically, there was a staged or real, whatever you may think, or a pushed for hostage operation in Lebanon, where essentially Hezbollah, via the IRGC, would take some hostages. And it was negotiated that after this hostage taking, that there would be a release of the hostages, and that was in exchange for a weapons swap. And so hostages for weapons were swapped, and that created effectively the covert cover story and the plausible deniability around whatever happened to those weapons. Now, what we also saw in the Iran-Contra affair is that US would send money to Israel. They still do to this day. Then Israel would spend it back into Lockheed Martin, General Dynamic, Raytheon. That props up the dollar. And if Israel can create war in the region, then it supports the stock price of those military stocks. And you have to, in order to agitate, you engage in covert operations to create religious tensions, recruit armies. And we've covered this many times in the geopolitical section. And so Israel would purchase those weapons from the military industrial complex in the US. And then you would use the CIA, Mossad, MI6 in order to funnel some of that money through the banks that were able to perform these operations within the financial industrial complex. In the case of Iran-Contra affair, it was all done via Credit Suisse in Switzerland, a Swiss bank. And they would use a shell company, and that shell company was connected to the beginning of Jeffrey Epstein trying to make his name. This is around the time when Roy Cohns and Charles Kushner was Jeffrey Epstein before Jeffrey Epstein, and Jared Kushner was married into the Trump family via his daughter. And so you had these entities that were involved in these weapons trafficking via Iran-Contra. Now, we know that different operations that we've seen in the past and we've covered through even just declassified documents. We know BCCI was an infamous bank that was used for these operations. We know that the Vatican Bank has been used. We know JP Morgan was the banker for Jeffrey Epstein. They settled their case, about 285 million. We know Deutsche Bank also settled for their involvement in the Jeffrey Epstein affair as well. But then Iran would essentially have a faction within the IRGC that would launder this money via mafia networks and various connections and get the weapons back to, in the end, these Nicaraguan Contras in Central South America. Now, I don't want to go through the whole thing because it's not worth doing it. We've covered it before. But once you've got those weapons and you support those militias within Central South America, they would then be used in order to support covert regime change so that America could overthrow governments, install a dictator, and then bribe them in order to take their resources and use them for American corporate interests, prop up the dollar, and create war. And also, they would fund their black op operations via drug trafficking routes, human trafficking routes, weapons trafficking routes, sex trafficking routes, and various other things. And so these were, the types of militia operation that we cover all the time. Now, if you're wondering whether this sounds interesting right now, given the fact of what's happening right now in the world, what is happening in the world right now? Well, we've got war with Iran, which is imminent, and I've shared my thoughts on where I think that goes. We've also got an explosion between Pakistan and Afghanistan, where the Taliban was there, which the Taliban receive US money, billions of dollars a year, in order to allow the drug trafficking routes to continue. Then it goes in via Mexico, and now there is escalation with the Mexican drug cartels all at the moment right now. So that's why I never take these things seriously, and I always look at it through following the money rather than the narrative, and why I put together my thesis. But anyway, I believe that this is still happening right now to today. And we know this, you'll get the evidence in 10, 20 years from now, but we have to speculate in real time. So all this to say is that these operations exist. We cover it every week. Make sure you subscribe if you want to understand these types of things so that you can understand how the world really works, so you don't fall for the narrative and we follow the money. Right, now let's get into the specific operations. Now we know that these financial industrial complex FIC aligned covert operations exist. And we know that there is a level of financial infrastructure that receives a layer of protection, and the government is subordinate to that power structure, as we're seeing from the cover up at the moment. So is it possible that Jane Street is one of those chosen hedge funds? It could be. With the all of these different types of things, I can't give you categoric evidence yet, but it implies to me that this would be a top candidate for one of those hedgies that would be involved in covert operations. Now, what does the financial industrial complex want to do right now? I believe it's turning America into a regional power, splitting the world up into multipolarity, and exerting various different financial weapons of mass destruction to infiltrate and vassalize various countries so that they can launch their ETF global empire. And one of the things they're trying to do is vassalize Central South America deeper into the financial industrial complex, and also open up Iran for their market. So you've got that narrative. Now, in that, we've talked about suspected operations to break the Japan carry trade, break the euro dollar, break the peg to the dollar pegs and the petrodollar. We also talked about the commodities boost. So we saw, starting right before Christmas last year in December, the silver short squeeze operation. And at the same time, simultaneously, Bitcoin was put through an accumulation operation. We're starting to see lots of inflows away from retail investors into institutional investors. I believe that this was a very successful operation to try and get institutional ownership of as much Bitcoin and squeeze out the retail ETF investors, just like I used to do in market making previously when I worked at the investment bank. And we also had the silver trade. Now, somebody is on the wrong side of that trade. So what have we actually seen? Could Jane Street be responsible for this silver short squeeze operation? So is Jane Street a financial industrial complex member? Highly likely. We've already covered different types of stories that might connect it to intelligence. We also know that as a result of the silver operation and short squeeze, that the largest holder of silver ETFs right now is Jane Street. We also know that the largest holder of IBIT, so SLV is the large silver ETF. We also know that the largest holder of IBIT, which is BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF, is guess who? Jane Street. And so we know that they have most likely undisclosed derivative positions, as they are a private company and we don't know what those positions are. Now, we do know through the public company disclosures of the ETF that Jane Street is the largest holder. So we have one-way transparency, but we don't have two-way transparency. Now, many people, I was warning everyone against Wall Street and Bitcoin. I was saying there's nothing we can do to stop it. But you need to understand, when they build this derivatives complex, they're going to control the short-term price of Bitcoin. And many people were violently opposing these things, calling me a conspiracy theorist and various other things. But now people are starting to understand it. Right. So how did they get that very large position? Is it because they are just bullish on Bitcoin and silver? Or is it because they've been using their privilege as an authorized participant, AR, in both SLV and IBIT? And so have they been able to create and redeem these ETF shares? Yes, that's what their position is. So when IBIT or SLV ETF want to create new units, they use Jane Street as one of the authorized participants in order to create new shares, and then there is a time frame by which they have to cover. And so there is an arbitrage in between, and it's not transparent, and it's opaque. And it's typically large banks or broker dealers that perform those functions. And so they can, in that moment, arbitrage the price of the Bitcoin and silver ETF versus the number of assets, which is known as net asset value. And so if you have more shares in that moment than assets, there is an arbitrage difference between the net asset value and the price of the ETF in that moment. And nobody would know, with the exception of those that are insiders. And so let's dig a little bit deeper. What is the architecture that was built around Bitcoin? I shared, from Operation Choke Point 2.0 and all the different Bitcoin operations that we've been covering. The Bitcoin supply is obviously spot Bitcoin, i.e. Bitcoin in self-custody, Bitcoin that you own where you own the key. There's only ever going to be 21 million of those. And that is enforced by a network of miners, node operators, developers, and the ecosystem that will never change that 21 million cap. And so you know that there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. That is what's unique about Bitcoin. With gold, you can mine some more, but historically it's only increased at a rate of 2%. With silver, you go through this, this process of refining the finished product, and it relies upon flows and mining companies, and it has industrial usage as well. And so they're always looking to discover more of the components to make up silver as well. But Bitcoin's price is not like it was when I first got involved, where there was a couple of it's not done on chain. So when you trade in a peer-to-peer network with a fixed supply where you own the private key, you can send that to anybody. But what sets the price? The price is set by exchanges. And so we had the first exchanges, and the price isn't set on chain. And so initially we had, price discovery by these various exchanges setting up. In part 2, when we do the interview with Amir, we will actually share experience from some of these initial exchanges and their infiltration attempts as well. But initially it was just spot exchanges. What does that mean? They say you deposit some Bitcoin at the exchange. They show you when you log in that you have, if you deposit a Bitcoin, you have a Bitcoin. But they hold the key. So you don't know if you actually have that Bitcoin unless you try to withdraw it. When you withdraw it, you know you have the Bitcoin because now you have the private key. But they could create many times more IOUs saying we owe you a Bitcoin when they may not have the Bitcoin. And the entire history of Bitcoin, we've had exchanges that did that, and they went bankrupt when people tried to claim them all. We had a run on the exchange. But initially, the price is set through spot exchanges. And so through that mechanism of creating databases on top of the blockchain, there is the opportunity to manipulate the price short term as well. It doesn't last forever, but it does last. Then we had Bitcoin derivatives complex that was constructed. It was initially created within our industry. So we had exchanges like Kraken, Bitfinex, BitMEX, and many others that came later. They were the early ones that would build all these different types of derivative contracts. So now you had Bitcoin, then you had the exchange balances, and then you had all these derivatives on top of it. So first they were created by us for investors, for the industry, and there were many, many different types of exchanges. But then when Wall Street came along, they started constructing their paper Bitcoin financial industrial complex. Early exchanges were like Layer 1 and various other ones. And we had the Commodities Mercantile Exchange, CME. They created various futures contracts, and those were cash settled. What that means is that they would be backed by Bitcoin, but you didn't, if you had a futures contract, which is, the ability to claim on Bitcoin at a future price, you didn't get Bitcoin. You would receive cash. So they'd have to sell the Bitcoin if they had the Bitcoin and cash settled. And it doesn't even engage in the Bitcoin market as well through these cash settled futures, which creates the opportunity for manipulation. They also had offshore perpetual swaps in various different jurisdictions with various different levels of regulations. I remember Goldman Sachs came along and started opening up the options market, the right that, but not the obligation in a contract to acquire Bitcoin. You got put options and various other different types of call options if you want to go long or short. But round about 2024 into 2025, we had the rise of the Bitcoin spot ETF. That means that the ETF, the exchange traded fund, is unleveraged, and there were leveraged ones where you could take out, 2x ETF and various other things. But it had to be backed by Bitcoin, and it had to be held in custody, so it wasn't cash settled. And leading up to that, or prior to that, we had Operation Choke Point 2.0, where there was a deliberate infiltration under the Biden administration through the financial industrial complex in order to crash various players in the Bitcoin ecosystem based upon what looks like an operation to completely discredit and create systemic risk across lots of fraud that was happening and was effectively allowed to happen at various levels. Now, with these Bitcoin ETFs, Coinbase is the main custodian. You have Fidelity as well. Fidelity is one of the largest asset managers. You have BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. Fidelity is one of those, and is also a custodian like Bank of New York Mellon as well. But you have a service called Prime Brokerage, and Prime Brokers effectively find you Bitcoin so that you can lever up and create these structured products, derivative products, and they work for hedge funds. Coinbase launched this Prime Brokerage service. You also have on-chain types of things, like where you could put some Bitcoin in custody with BitGo, and then it would give you a token called a wrap Bitcoin on the Ethereum blockchain, and then you could engage in DeFi contracts. They also had things like, all of these different things. All this to say is that once this derivatives complex was built, there is speculation, and the audit requirement is very hard because it wasn't regulated to the degree where this is fully audited, where one Bitcoin might be the backing of several of those contracts. And this creates the paper Bitcoin market, where now you have more Bitcoin than exists. So let's say 13 million Bitcoin right now is held in private keys. About 4 million of them are lost. And then you've got 3 million, there's only 1 million left to be mined. And then you've got another 3 million that are on exchanges or within this, financial industrial complex and custody relationships. Some of those might have multiple claims. And so you might have 8 million paper Bitcoins on top. Now, a paper Bitcoin is not a Bitcoin because you have to settle in the end. And it's only in times when you run on the exchange or you have an issue with derivative contracts or people start to question, do they have those Bitcoin, that the need for self-custody Bitcoin. And then we heard that, for example, in a Michael Saylor interview recently, he said, I don't know if it's true, he said that financial institutions trying to, borrow, to basically get access to Bitcoin and pay very subpar rates as well. And so there is speculation that somebody's trying to cover these positions. We don't know. We don't have transparency on this information. But there is a kind of vector. When the banking system blew up, and everyone realized you need gold, you want cash, and then the IOUs had to be bailed out. You have something called, you got total return swaps, all these different structures, notes, all these different types of products. But by having the ability to create more Bitcoin than actually exists through these paper contracts, it can be used by market makers and hedge funds in order to get unfair advantage. And so when you have companies like Strategy, I talked about Michael Saylor, that firstly create a simple product for issuing equity and holding as much Bitcoin as possible, and then going out to the debt capital markets, those that want to lend to Strategy, where he would pay a fixed interest rate and then use that money in order to buy Bitcoin. And then he would set up more speculative products that would pay dividends. And then he would borrow against his Bitcoin and then also closed out some of those loans. Well, we had the construct of the Bitcoin Treasury Company and credit products where the more he borrows, the more he becomes subordinate to his bondholders and his equity holders and his corporate debt and his need to pay these dividends. And that creates a centralized attack vector for the more he borrows, the more Bitcoin he can put within Strategy. Now, that actually has an effect of taking Bitcoin off the market, because to this date, Strategy hasn't sold their Bitcoin. And so on the up cycle, that created a lot of upward pressure on the price. At the same time, what else was constructed? Well, we had the introduction of Cantor Fitzgerald via Tether that said they're going to be holding the US treasuries for the stablecoin Tether. And then we had the introduction of JP Morgan, where Jamie Dimon said he hated Bitcoin. Then suddenly JP Morgan would start constructing financial products. And they started to push Bitcoin-backed loans. And then Cantor Fitzgerald started to push Bitcoin-backed loans. What does that mean? It means they want you to give them your Bitcoin, hold it in custody, and then they would mine some fiat currency. And if the price of Bitcoin crashes below a certain point, they would sell the Bitcoin, which creates cascading liquidations, or they'd call you and you'd have to deposit more Bitcoin if you had more Bitcoin, effectively allowing you to lever up. And then exchanges would do that and create derivative products as well. And so you can build the ability to effectively take everyone's Bitcoin that is levering up their Bitcoin, either via trading or borrowing against their Bitcoin. And you can centralize as much Bitcoin as possible, accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible through strategy on the way up, but also through Cantor and various other products on the way down. And so that's what I've been warning people over the long term, that what Wall Street would be doing. And this doesn't last forever because you have to cover these contracts as well. But this creates in all moments what's called a systemic float ratio. So SFR, which is the ratio between real Bitcoin versus paper Bitcoin. Now, we don't know what that is because there's no transparency on the market, but I do believe they created significant paper versions of Bitcoin in the last cycle. And now I remember everyone saying, yeah, the adults are in the room right now, or some simps for the financial industrial complex. And you remember I had that infamous argument on Spaces where I lost my rag around some of the Zios and various other things, and some of the Wall Street sympathizers, where I was saying, no, you've replaced the amateur market manipulators with the real market manipulators. And so you will still get volatility. They were saying, no, it's going to be a mature asset. It will steadily grow and various other things. No, I said, I've always been used to Bitcoin volatility. It's awesome, for accumulating a Bitcoin, allowing people to get in. And once you've developed the conviction, if you do what I've always been telling to people ever since Bitcoin was $3, own more Bitcoin this month than last month, regardless of price, you effectively become an investor. They do the market manipulation, and this used to be done at the exchange level with the insiders, and you didn't need to worry about what the insiders are doing. Don't try and sell the top or buy the bottom and various other things. Now, they were saying that when Wall Street comes in, this will be eased out and you won't have the corrections. I'll say, no, you have the major market manipulators as well. And I think that's turned out to be correct as well. So this ratio exists when basically synthetic, i.e. Bitcoin IOU claims exceed the real coins that are available for delivery. Excuse me. Let me grab some water. Got a little bit of hole in my water. I've got a hole in my bucket. All right. Okay. So when there is not enough Bitcoin available for delivery, you have to try and get that Bitcoin. And the only way to get that Bitcoin is when the price rockets up in order to try and persuade someone to sell that Bitcoin. And so with these different types of mechanism, you can do short-term price manipulation via leverage-driven. You try and get people into leverage. You try and get people into custody, and you try and get people to borrow against their Bitcoin, and you try and get them to buy a Bitcoin treasury company rather than Bitcoin itself. And you try and get them to use an ETF so that then the authorized participants, the APs, like Jane Street, are able to create those shares and try and settle underneath and do their operations in between. So this is the supply-demand mechanisms. And now there's nothing we could ever do about this. This was always going to happen. And no product is immune to this. This happened with gold, happened with silver, happened with equities. This has happened with, and now Bitcoin. And so the only way to outperform this is to be an investor rather than a trader, unless you're on the inside. I learned that lesson a long time ago. And this is the derivative complex and the phase that they built up to prior to 2022, and then Operation Choke Point 2.0, and then leading into the Trump administration. So this is bipartisan. This is the financial industrial complex that doesn't care who's in charge. I believe right now that there was a high SFR rate, and that's based upon settlement timing, crashes. You can have operations on the way up and operations on the way down. Now, we're not going to understand everything about the manipulation, but when Jane Street went into the spotlight this week, there was speculation around those different things, and we're gonna go through them. But preceding this, we had the silver operation, SLV. And we saw that Jane Street added, check this out, after that operation, an additional 20.67 million shares in SLV in Q4 2025, making them the largest holder of the iShares Silver Trust in the world. So we know that either they've got lots of contracts on the other side, or they're the largest holder. Now, who do they work for? Are they a front for another bank? You know, this plausible deniability exercise, you create a complex of hedge funds in order to perform these covert operations. I believe that the financial industrial complex has an operation to weaken the dollar and transition to a multipolar world. So silver has basically, long term accused by people in the silver community of, paper suppression. They believe that there has always been oppression in the price. And this led to the rise of the dollar, and the dollar is the world reserve currency because you have to pay a custody fee on these hard metals. Then silver became more industrial, used for AI, for solar panels, for military industrial complex machinery, for data centers, for all sorts of components. But it was derivatives dominated. The spot market was pretty small. Now, what happened with the silver operation is they created an environment where everyone wants their spot. China then said, we're going to regulate who actually gets to buy silver from China, which is the largest holder and the largest silver refiners. And there's always been long accusation that the synthetic supply of SLV has always exceeded the physical supply of silver available. And Jane Street was basically positioned in Q4 2025, whereby they could do a massive short squeeze if they wanted as a private company, which seems to have a certain level of protection, and without us being able to see the whole kimono. We could only see the regulated part, which is the ETF part, which lists Jane Street as the largest purchaser, but we can't see the derivatives part on the side. We know that right now, the demand for silver from industrial producers created a structural deficit. And around Christmas, leading up to the holiday period, there was a bunch of AI videos and narratives in order to push out and explain to people this structural deficit. There was also claims and allegations that JP Morgan has been long-term short. That was from the financial crisis days when it acquired Bear Stearns, and there was that Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns position as well. But also, this coincides with the narrative around artificial intelligence. So we had AI is going to take over the world. We had dollar weakening. We had tariffs. We had silver structural deficit. And we had, basically a financial industrial complex, technical industrial complex, military industrial complex, geopolitical aligned event for this operation, where maybe they tried to cover that short position and inflict it upon someone else so that there was a covert bailout happening. And what did we see? We've been covering this all along. So we had basically a ginormous short squeeze where we had unprecedented increases in the price of silver. We had the Federal Reserve shift from quantitative from quantitative tightening to quantitative easing, but they didn't call it quantitative easing because rather buying long-term government bonds, they were buying short-term bill treasuries. And so they don't call it quantitative easing. And that was to bail out the repo market, which is the market to overnight lending between banks. This was all happening during the short squeeze. I think there was 18 billion initially of covert QE. We had a regime change at the Federal Reserve by Trump pushing to get the rates down. And we don't know who was on the wrong side of the silver trade. We do know that maybe there was a covert bailout that we just don't know about yet. We only get to see these things after the fact once they're resolved. So now consider that Jane Street is the largest holder of IBIT. Could there be another operation to suppress the price, get into a structural short position, and then end up doing a similar operation? Well, maybe at some time. And maybe, just maybe, the financial industrial complex doesn't have enough Bitcoin. And so could they push out narratives that makes the everyday person an ETF provider want to sell? While the volume of institutional holdings goes up. Well, that's exactly what we have seen. And we saw maximum amount of FUD operations in order to do that. Was that organic? It was also connected to the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files. I've long believed that the financial industrial complex has been strategically leaking those and telling the DOJ what they can release based upon their longer term operations to move to multipolarity. But we do know that Jane Street is an authorized participant for IBIT, and it's got the same ETF structure as SLV, so the silver ETF as well. They have the same derivatives overlay on top of it. But, it's kind of a different scale of asset. Like silver's a lot smaller, easier to manipulate. And so is Bitcoin in terms of, remember, Bitcoin took over silver in terms of the spot market as a market cap. And they reversed that. So they were playing around with this Bitcoin silver ratio at the time as well. Now, what did we get this week? Why are we talking about this now? Well, the reason we got this week is because a lawsuit was dropped by Terra Luna, which could have been Do Kwon trying to cover his ass or the bankruptcy trying to recover some funds. But it was pushed as a lawsuit against Jane Street. And this was related to the previous $40 billion stablecoin crash. Now, for those that weren't around in 2021-22 when this happened, I was actually writing my third book. And I'm going to go through I asked artificial intelligence to create a video from reading my book, because I remember doing a lot of research on how this operation worked and how it happened. And so I asked artificial intelligence to create a whiteboard explainer video by reading the book that I haven't released yet, where I've been documenting the entire history of Bitcoin from my perception of being a shareholder in many, many different companies and kind of seeing a lot of this from the inside. So why did this operation suddenly come back into the spotlight? So I dusted off the old book, and I'm just going to make sure that everyone's up to date. And then we'll look at what the lawsuit said about Jane Street. We'll look at the Indian case, and then we'll look at the common accusations and find out what we can learn from this and then what you can do. So Azad, if you could play the first AI video on Terra Luna.
Back in May of 2022, one of the biggest projects in all of crypto, a top 10 player, just vanished in the span of a single week. Today, we're going to break down one of the most catastrophic events in crypto history and figure out how a $60 billion project literally evaporated into thin air.
And to help us unpack this whole thing, we're turning to the work of Bitcoin OG, investor, and financial analyst Simon Dixon. Now, what's so incredible is that he was actually in the middle of writing his third book, A Complete History of Bitcoin, when this all went down. So he was documenting the collapse live, in real time, giving us this unbelievable analysis straight from a chapter he was writing as the disaster unfolded.
Just look at that number. $60 billion. That's how much value was just wiped off the map from the Terra Luna ecosystem. gone in just a handful of days. This was the event that kicked off a truly brutal and unforgiving crypto winter. Okay, so let's dive right in. To really wrap our heads around the Terra Luna collapse, we first need to understand the sheer scale of the damage. This wasn't just one project failing, it was an earthquake that shook the entire market to its core. And Simon Dixon's analysis really puts this into perspective. He calls the aftermath the crypto apocalypse. The Terra collapse was the catalyst that sent the entire crypto market cap plunging from a peak of $3 trillion to under $1 trillion. It vaporized $2 trillion in value. So the big question is how? How does a project that looked like a pillar of the industry, one that attracted huge institutional money, just crumble like that? Well, to get that, we've got to look under the hood at how this thing was actually built.
All right, so let's get into the mechanics of this thing. Terra's entire system was built on a seemingly brilliant, but as we all know now, incredibly fragile idea. A machine that was designed to create a stable currency, literally out of thin air. At the very heart of it was the stablecoin Terra USD, or UST. Now you need to understand, most stablecoins are backed by real assets. You know, actual dollars or bonds sitting in a bank somewhere. But UST? Nope. It was backed by pure computer code and its relationship with another super volatile token, Luna.
The whole system relied on this clever trick, this arbitrage loop. Check this out. The code always let you swap exactly $1 worth of Luna for one UST token, and vice versa. So, if UST's price ever crept up to, say, $1.01, traders could instantly burn $1 of Luna, mint a new UST, and sell it for a quick, risk-free penny. That selling pressure pushes the price right back down to $1. It's a pretty clever idea, right? It essentially turned traders into the system's own central bank, constantly keeping things in balance.
And this slide really gets to the heart of the risk, doesn't it? On one side, you've got stablecoins, backed by actual stuff you can audit. On the other side, you had UST, and it was backed entirely by faith. Faith in the algorithm and faith that this other crypto token, Luna, would always have value.
But here's the catch. For that whole balancing act to work, you need one critical thing. Tons and tons of people actually wanting to hold and use UST. So how do you manufacture that kind of demand out of nowhere? Well, that's where things get really, really unsustainable. This was the number. Just look at it. Almost 20%. This was the insane annual yield that Terra's lending platform, Anchor Protocol, was promising people, just for depositing their stable UST coins. Think about that. Your bank might give you what, a fraction of a percent? This was promising 20. It was almost unbelievable.
And this is the absolute key. And Simon Dixon's analysis just nailed this. That incredible yield wasn't real. It wasn't being earned from any legitimate financial activity. It was a marketing gimmick paid for directly out of the project's war chest, subsidized by venture capital money. It was designed to create a massive wave of FOMO, pulling in billions from everyone, all chasing this impossible return. It was a ticking time bomb, plain and simple.
And this is where a quote from Simon Dixon just hits the nail on the head. If something can be successfully attacked in the market, it will eventually be attacked. Basically, if your system has a weak spot, someone, somewhere, is going to find it and exploit it. And Terra's massive artificial incentive structure, it was like painting a giant bullseye on its own back. And in May 2022, that bullseye got hit. The attack came. And what happened next was a full-blown, system-wide bank run. A $60 billion death spiral that played out in just a few agonizing days.
It all kicked off on May 7th. All of a sudden, a massive $2 billion of UST gets pulled from that high-yield protocol, and it's just dumped onto the open market. The system simply couldn't handle a shock that big. The peg, that sacred one-to-one link to the dollar, it broke. And that's when the real panic started. So as everyone is rushing for the exits, desperately trying to sell their UST, the algorithm does the only thing it's programmed to do. It starts printing Luna. And I don't mean a little. I mean trillions upon trillions of new Luna tokens trying to soak up all that UST. It was hyperinflation on a scale we've rarely seen, and it completely, utterly annihilated the value of Luna, from over $100 to basically worthless.
But here's the thing. This wasn't just about Terra. Its collapse was like pulling the first Jenga block from the bottom of the tower. It sent this shockwave of failure and insolvency ripping through the entire crypto industry, and it exposed some really, really deep systemic problems.
You see, all these huge names in the industry, hedge funds like Three Arrows Capital, lenders like Celsius and Voyager, they were all massively exposed. They had huge bets on Terra's ecosystem, often with borrowed money. When Terra went down, it started a chain reaction that pulled them all down with it.
And the very next big domino to fall was the huge crypto hedge fund Three Arrows Capital, better known as 3AC. They had a ton of money in Luna, and when it went to zero, poof, it just blew a gigantic hole in their balance sheet, triggering their own collapse.
And that's the chain reaction right there. Step 1, Terra implodes. Step 2, 3AC, one of its biggest backers, goes bust and defaults on all the money it had borrowed. And so step 3, the companies that loaned them that money, like Voyager and Celsius, they're suddenly insolvent too. They slammed the gate shut, freezing withdrawals for millions of regular people. It was an absolute credit crisis. So when you look back at this whole mess, this story that Simon Dixon documented as it happened, it leaves us with this really big, uncomfortable question. When a system is built on these kinds of artificial incentives, with just a handful of people really pulling the strings, can you even call it decentralized? Or is something like a death spiral not just a risk, but basically inevitable?
Okay, so that was a little summary of my work at the time. Obviously, there was a lot more detail to that. Now, I remember because I was there as one of the 7th largest creditor in the Celsius bankruptcy, as one of the shareholders and somebody that was testing borrowing against my Bitcoin, which is why I don't do it anymore, taught me a good lesson. Fortunately, it was a tiny percentage of the Bitcoin that I was willing to speculate around. I remember that this didn't take down Celsius, even though that's been framed, because Celsius, and we covered this last week, was one of the institutions that I said the co-founder got Israeli protection. And there were lots of Mossad-style connections. I'm not saying they were directly Mossad, but it was definitely evidence that it was used as an op. If you didn't watch my interview with an ex-IDF Israeli that left Israel, make sure you watch the interview. We went deep into this and the level of protection that they received. But Celsius was actually one of the insiders that pulled their money out. There were 3 insiders that pulled their money out. One of them was Celsius, one of them was Jane Street, and the other was Transform Labs, the Silicon Valley funded company that was subsidizing a lot of the yield and on the wrong side of the pump and dump scheme. Who was meant to go down? Well, Three Arrows Capital went down. They were on the wrong side of the trade. And so did FTX Alameda. Now, does that mean that FTX Alameda wasn't in the inner circle? Well, we know that FTX had many of the same circles as Jane Street. So maybe the operation was FTX was meant to go down. Alameda was meant to go down. Celsius pulled out some of the money, so had insider information, but it was other recklessness, fraud, and theft that took down the Celsius side, mainly around the manipulation of the Cell token, in the case of FTX, the FTT token, and in the case of Terra Luna, the shitcoin around that as well. So people talk about the 40 million stablecoin, but there was also, 40 billion stablecoin. There was also 20 billion in the shitcoin that backed it up that we talked about in the AI overview. So Luna was essentially a major catalyst for the crash of 2022, but was it the only player? Well, no, there was the precursor to Bitcoin ETFs, which was GBTC, headed by Barry Silbert. And Barry Silbert was also engaged in lots of incredibly fraudulent activity. There was lots of fraud, Celsius and FTX, Alameda. So it was a chain reaction, but it wasn't the whole story because GBTC was the position that also wiped out a bunch of money for both BlockFi, for Three Arrows Capital, the hedge fund, and also FTX. Now, if you remember, right after this, Sam Bankman-Fried was painting himself as the hero that was going to buy up all the companies and bail out all the companies. It turned out the reason is because he'd lost $8 billion and was also engaging in all sorts of fraud. He came up on a space. I asked him a bunch of questions. Those questions were actually used as evidence in the court case on that X space as well. But if you look at the chain of events, May the 7th, 2022, the Terra basically ignition event occurred. And if you look at the law case, they said that there were insider trading and insider knowledge prior to that. And so what actually happened, excuse me. So we know prior to the collapse that Transform Labs withdrew 150 million UST. And that was from, the Curve protocol that was responsible for propping up a bit of the algorithm. We also know that prior to that, they changed their business model and backed a bunch of this algorithmic stablecoin with Bitcoin. And so that led to a bunch of the buying volume leading up in the bull market. Now, when they needed to liquidate, they also had to liquidate a bunch of the Bitcoin, and that led to the crash of Bitcoin, the leverage, the hedge funds, and then we had the cascading liquidation cycle, the same exact setup that they set up today with all of the Wall Street institutions as well. So within 10 minutes, according to the lawsuit, a wallet that was allegedly, in the federal lawsuit that we can look up on the blockchain, that received about, millions of dollars, was linked to Jane Street, and that wallet withdrew about $85 million. So the allegation is that both Transform Labs and Jane Street, and I remember the other one was Celsius as well, but that wasn't covered in the lawsuit because they settled in the bankruptcy. So $235 million of liquidity was removed before public disclosure, plus the Celsius stuff as well that wasn't put in that. That created the UST DPEG. That created a liquidation cycle. That led to the lunar collapse, and that led to $40 billion wiped out over that period as well. And following Tether, we had the bankruptcy of the hedge fund, Three Arrows Capital, which is still in a bankruptcy and settling. We had the Chapter 11 for both Voyager and Celsius. And then later we had the FTX collapse, which was around Binance exposing its position with the FTT token around November 2022. Prior to that, Sam Bankman-Fried was trying to buy out all the crypto companies and try and maintain their reputation and roll over the Ponzi. This led to the crypto winter, and that led to Operation Choke Point 2.0, where a bunch of the crypto-friendly banks were wiped out. And we know that was an operation at the Federal Reserve level, at the ETF level, at the financial industrial complex level. Then we had the bank takeover of all the different Bitcoin derivatives complex being built, and the Bitcoin financial industrial complex and all these different tools being handed over to traditional Wall Street players. We then had the move over to the Trump administration, the ETF launch, BlackRock saying that he's now telling everyone about Bitcoin, the handover to institutional accumulation, the rise of Bitcoin treasury companies, and Jane Street was the authorized participant, of course, for that. Now, the lawsuit allegations are basically coming from a former Transform Labs intern that worked. Basically, his name was Bryce Pratt, and he later joined Jane Street after working for Transform Labs. So we had an intern at Transform Labs that then went over to Jane Street. And the allegation is that there was a private chat group that was allegedly set up that was sharing insider liquidity information. Now, who was in that group? We'll find out. But trades that were essentially, they were basically in the lawsuit that was talking about being impossible without inside information was the language that they used. And Jane Street basically denies the allegations and says that it's absolute just baseless accusations and blame shifting. But the court proceedings are going to be going on. And so we will watch with interest, and we're going to get some transparency. Now, remember what happened with the FTX bankruptcy. They revealed everything. They took out FTX, but they left all the political campaign financing and all of the corruption around the board, the family of SBF, and the Sullivan and Cromwell became the lawyers as well. And so Sullivan and Cromwell are the same lawyers that work with intelligence operations in the formation of the CIA and many of the different Mossad operations and MI6 operations as well. And so you notice this law firm turning up. You also notice that SBF was connected and his family seemed to get away with it. You also notice that SBF and his family are tweeting right now to try and get a Trump pardon as well. But anyway, what were the accusations? The accusations is that they had the ability through their liquidity to move the spot price of Bitcoin and the tokens, and then they could harvest these derivatives. They could create a collapse that would escalate those cascading liquidations. And Jane Street, interestingly, was connected. All of the people that worked for, or some of the people that worked for FTX, which was the exchange, and Alameda, which was the hedge fund, they had a background of working and came from Jane Street. That's where they were groomed, allegedly, as well. So Sam Bankman-Fried, who worked for Jane Street before he worked for creating Alameda, the hedge fund. So it started as a hedge fund and then later invested in FTX, the exchange. And FTX, the exchange, allowed Alameda Research to pull out unlimited liquidity in order to make these bets. And on the board was Sullivan Cromwell, who is a law firm, as I said, that was connected to CIA, Deep State, and various other things as well. Now, what about who was in the SEC at the time of SBF? If you remember, SBF was writing the regulations prior to Clarity Act and Genius Act that we're having right now. His firm, FTX, was sponsoring the regulations. He was also the only one that was able to get a meeting with the SEC at the time. Who was chair of the SEC? Chair of the SEC was Gary Gensler. Gary Gensler, who was allegedly contacted by email in the Epstein files and tried to get connections with Gary Gensler. Gary Gensler worked at MIT. MIT was doing the central bank digital currency project, was Sam Bankman-Fried. And Alameda operated with a very, very sophisticated derivative strategy that turned out to be a complete fraud when the derivative complex was being built. And for some reason in 2017, Sam Bankman-Fried came from nowhere and was held as the boy. You know, the media had a massive, massive boost in terms of his reputation. So he was groomed from Jane Street and propelled into superstardom. And those that came into Bitcoin later were all like, I thought he'd been there. He was an OG that'd been there all along. Now, he was manufactured. And he shared quantitative trading networks. And apparently these existed across these different firms. So when FTX goes bankrupt and $8 billion was the allegation of the whole, we had an interesting timeline. In 2021, FTX buys an 8% share in which company? Anthropic. Anthropic, the one that we're being told is doing all the disruption in AI right now. Now, somehow, SBF, via his networks and the part of the case that was dismissed, where he would hired fixers like Jeffrey Epstein in order to broker being able to purchase a position in Anthropic. And that was for about $500 million. In 2022, when FTX collapsed, it was one of the disclosures that there was a large position in Anthropic. And now SBF is using that because the value of those shares went up to say that there was no fraud and no hole. No, the reason that there was, you got bailed out is because you used the bankruptcy process and sold all the Bitcoin and locked in a Bitcoin claim at $15,000 after the price of Bitcoin was sold. And who ended up with some of those Anthropic shares from the bankruptcy, or they were sold to? You guessed it. Jane Street ended up with shares at approximately an $18 billion valuation in the most important and successful company in AI alongside the various others. So Jane Street reportedly buys a $100 million Anthropic share connected to this position. So there is no proven corruption, but we can connect a bunch of dots. We also know that the investigation into it was thrown out in the bankruptcy case, and they just put SBF into prison and said, right, that's enough. We don't need to, that's a big enough prison sentence. We don't need to look into anything else. But we do know that they basically shared personnel, pipelines, positioning into both the collapses. And we know that they were connected throughout these cycles, and there were these different types of groups. And so in January 2024, we had the creation of the spot Bitcoin ETF, which was approved by the SEC. So Larry Fink is able to get a spot Bitcoin ETF approved. The crash was created by GBTC, which was the Global Bitcoin Trust, which was Barry Silbert, who settled, didn't go into prison, and suddenly got away with everything. But SBF was taken down for the fraud that he committed. And now we get this Operation Choke Point 2.0. So the BlackRock IBIT basically approved an authorized participant. And who were those authorized participants? The main one was Jane Street. And we had other types of ones that we should look into. Virtual Americas. Virtual Americas, JP Morgan Securities, and then Marex as well as the other one. Now we move to September 2025. The SEC approves. What did they approve? What was the first thing they approved under the Trump administration? We have the SEC approving in-kind create basically ability for authorized participants to have Bitcoin settlement from a Bitcoin ETF just for authorized participants, not for everybody else. So you could buy a Bitcoin ETF and you could exchange the Bitcoin ETF for Bitcoin only if you were an authorized participant. And so that was approved in September 2025. So now APs can take the Bitcoin ETF and they can exchange it for Bitcoin directly. And there is a time lag that should be investigated as this proceeds between issuing the shares and settling as well. And that may be, I don't know what that extended settlement time frame may be, but this is the lack of transparency. Now, what happens if you're an authorized participant? You're not subjected to the same level of transparency. Why are they not subjected to the same level of transparency? Well, they say market manipulation. So they have a black box and a weakness within this. So major trading firms are now basically embedded directly into Bitcoin's liquidity pipelines. And so in late 2024 and early 2026, basically, the allegation was from the Bitcoin community that there is something called a 10 a.m. A 10 a.m. was one of the allegations. And what this was, that basically a pattern that people started to post about on X, that at 10 a.m., there would be, beginning from November 2024, and this was accelerating throughout 2025, was the allegation that approximately 10 a.m. ET, which is the US equity open time, when the ETFs would open, that there would always be a 2 to 3% sharp Bitcoin dump. And this went viral across Twitter. So everyone was reposting the same thing, saying that there's a 10 a.m. Dump, and everyone was saying that was Jane Street. The reason they were saying that was Jane Street is it matches other patterns in the Indian case where we got transparency as well. And so what the allegations were is that 100 million to 200 million long derivative liquidations would suddenly occur around that time. And then it would recover later in the session after that sudden pulling of all the long liquidations. And they would pick out different dates that went viral across Twitter. One was December the 1st, 2025, where this happened. The other was December the 5th, 2025. Then it happened again on December the 8th, 2025. Then it happened again on December the 10th, 2025. Then December the 12th, 2025. Then December the 15th, 2025, all leading up to the silver SLV short squeeze as well. And this continued across January and February 2026. Now, the allegation is that, for example, there was, when Bitcoin was priced at about $89,700, it would suddenly, in this liquidation cycle, when the US market opens, it would crash down to 87,700 within minutes, basically, as soon as the market would open. Now, that would be 171 million in long liquidations were wiped out during that time. And they came up with a nickname for this, and people started posting it. And they said that it was the 10 a.m. slam. And so when basically Transform lawsuit dropped this week, the headlines hit that the 10 a.m. slam and the dumps, they suddenly stopped happening. So I wanted to look at that this week and say, is that actually true? Because it went viral across Twitter. And so the allegation was that the manipulation has now stopped. The 10 a.m. slam no longer happens because the lawsuit came out and therefore they stopped doing it. There was another allegation, and I reposted this and corrected it later, that Jane Street deleted all of their tweets. Now, anyone that's a lawyer would say, don't delete all of your tweets. That's a type of behavior that is very problematic. It didn't actually happen, even though it went viral across Twitter. They never tweeted. I can't prove that, but that's what, from my research, looks like, because I wasn't looking at Jane Street prior to that. But I'm sure evidence will be presented. So I don't think they deleted their tweets. But there was a pause in the 10 a.m. slam this week. And so I was leading up to this, looking at the actual data. And so basically, if you look at the BTC price action in February 2026, because no one actually looks at this, you can see that on February the 24th, the 10 a.m. pump led to it being up 2%. So people were like, okay, the slam is over. What happened the next day? February the 25th, the 10 a.m. pump was up 1.5%. Then on the 26th, the 10 a.m. slam was flat. So we didn't have the dump. February 27th, the 10 a.m. was down 0.8%. And so we had a Bitcoin rally, but, you know, I guess you could say that it wasn't consistent. So it's not happening right now. But the allegations were that the shorts are liquidated. And so we can't really pull any data to find out whether this was actual proof. Because if you look at the... but having looked at the data, so we were talking about the 10 a.m. dump. Across the data that I looked at, I just pulled out what was happening at 10 a.m. The 10 a.m. dump, it was rare that it would actually happen. So either it was coordinated dates, but it wasn't consistent. It didn't happen every single day. Now, the 10 a.m. pump was quite common. So we would get a pump around about 10 a.m. and then we would have days where there was the 10 a.m. dump. But the most common was that nothing would happen. And so draw with that what you want. Either they're doing it on selected days, but I think there's no consistent action. And so you'd have to actually really attribute to, I think you can only say that it's random movement. that's that's what we concluded from there. Now, the next allegation is the 10 a.m. dump was at Jane Street. Well, I don't think there's anything we can prove at the moment. But if this actually goes to court, then maybe there could be data requests that prove that, unless it's a protected class. So what was the next allegation? The next allegation was that the massive liquidations that kicked off the bear market from $125,000 to where we are today, that really kicked off when there was ginormous cascading liquidations on October the 10th, 2025. That was an infamous day. It was actually, in the entire history of derivatives existing in Bitcoin, we had $19 billion of liquidations in a very, very quick period of time. And so the $19 billion was effectively across the entire crypto market. So this wasn't just unique to Bitcoin. This was at exchanges that made multiple markets, but $5 billion of it could be attributed to Bitcoin. And so if it's Jane Street and it's using, its authorized participant, then there's only $5 billion of liquidation. Now that's serious as well. That happened on the 10th of October, but it did really kick off the reversal in the price and the bear market. Altcoins were completely wrecked after this. Good riddance, 20 to 70%. Sorry if you own some. If you are a long-term listener of Simon Dixon Hard Talk, you don't mess around with gambling. But the allegation was that you saw there was a massive hit on the spot markets of Bitcoin. Then you had a massive drop in the index during that day. That obviously triggered perpetual futures liquidations, margin calls, and those that, then that creates a cascade if there are margin calls, which creates the forced selling, and that accelerates the forced selling. And then you have to cover some of your shorts afterwards if you were profiting from it. And then there would have been low margin calls. That all happened to a very high degree in a very large wick on October the 10th. Spot liquidity on that day was 1/15th of the price liquidity, the perpetual futures liquidity. So the vast majority of the market was paper Bitcoin through derivatives contracts and perpetual futures. And there was a need for spot Bitcoin, and somebody was on the right side of those trades. This was the derivative architecture that really allowed this ignition and cascading liquidation to happen. If you control those types of markets and you use a covert operation like we saw with Terra Luna, then what is it that actually ignited this? Well, there was a public rift between Binance and OKX. Binance is an exchange that is global in nature, but regulated within UAE, has a background in multiple jurisdictions, a Cayman Island structure, various other things. So relative to the US, offshore. OKX, which originally was a Chinese exchange, relocated to Hong Kong. They said that they got rugged by Binance. And this was regards to a stable coin that blew up. I didn't know anything about this stable coin because there's a lot in the market, but it was called USDE. So OKX was blaming Binance for the wick, and that wick was created by the perpetual markets that were the vast majority of the trading volume. After that, we saw several months later, recently, that there were allegations in the South Korean exchange BitThumb that there isn't enough Bitcoin to meet their Bitcoin paper obligations. And so we're seeing the same operations time and time again, but we don't have that transparency. We also know that CZ, who handed over his compliance in Binance to the US government, and when Israel wanted to seize Palestinian accounts, they complied with that. And CZ suddenly gets a pardon and only 4 months in prison. We know that there was a pardon operation, and we also know that there were deals done between World Liberty Financial, where their stablecoin was allegedly attacked, and we know the Trump administration did a partnership with Asher Ganut of Hit. What was the name of the mining company? They were involved in the Celsius bankruptcy. Hut 8. They did a partnership with the sons of Donald Trump and, Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr., and their Bitcoin mining operation got a huge hit as well. And so we're seeing all of this coordinated action as well. Is that a financial industrial complex operation to keep the Trump administration on track? We also know that there was a $2 billion investment facilitated through World Liberty Financial's stablecoin into an investment in Binance, and Binance owns 87% of the stablecoin that the Trump family launched through World Liberty Financial, connected to the largest investor, Steve Witkoff, who is the envoy for the Middle East negotiating these border peace operations, as well as Trump's son, Jared Kushner, being the one that is facilitating investment via the border peace that we covered last week as well. I don't want to go through that again. So we're seeing that there are potential FIC operations through these corrupt blackmail operations, and the allegation is that this was done via Jane Street. We don't have any evidence that this was done via Jane Street yet. What do we know, though? We do know that similar operations happen through the transparency we have in the Indian case. So people were putting the two together. Jason Belcher said similar operation, potentially. We can't say it yet, but there is a pattern that we are starting to notice here. So in July 2025, we know that the SEBI, which is the enforcement division within India, and we know there were similar operations within South Korea and China. So we know India, South Korea, and China are looking for transparency around Jane Street's market manipulation. We also know that Scott Bessent engages in currency warfare through his admissions. Where is this being done? Is this a protected class financial industrial complex? And is Jane Street a key node in the proof of weapons network? And is it above the law? We don't know. But it seems to be protected in the US. And we will see whether it is protected in the US, just like factions of FTX, just like factions of Binance. So the SEBI, India's investigation, we have a 105-page enforcement order that was against Jane Street's different types of entities. It was in relation to a stock where there was a morning pump in a stock called Bank Nifty, and there was derivative positions where they had 7.3x larger derivative exposure than the spot underlying stock. And there was an afternoon reversal, which was pattern around that. And it led to $580 million of gains for Jane Street, which has now been frozen in escrow. And the regulator's language around these financial weapons of mass destruction was, quote, deliberately devised device. It was a deliberately devised device to manipulate settlement prices. Settlement prices. So could this be the ETF play around settlement? We shall see. But essentially, you move the spot markets, you harvest the derivative complex, you reverse the positions after gaining longer short exposure and various other things. You repeat the pattern again and again and again. And we basically, through the India case, have a documented precedent linking Jane Street to these types of market derivative operations. So the answer is, where are we now? And then we're going to answer the question of what you can do, and then we're going to go into the interview segment in part 2. I told you this is going to be comprehensive for those geeks that like to go into the detail and get things right. And then we'll obviously create the AI videos for those that want to get the quick TLDR and whiteboard videos as well. What have we had since then? So we have had the construct of what I've always been warning people about: Bitcoin treasury companies, which is where you take OG Bitcoiners or people that have reputations and brands, and you wrap them in a financial weapon of mass destruction so that they become part of the derivative complex. The first one I warned everyone about was Strategy, MSTR, via Michael Saylor. Basically, we now have massive unsecured convertible debt issued against an equity position, so bondholders subordinate to equity or above the equity holders, we have heavy dilutive mechanisms for issuing more equity in order to buy more Bitcoin. We have a complex arbitrage process, and it is all dependent upon the financial industrial complex capital markets providing the liquidity so that MicroStrategy can buy more Bitcoin, and that creates an upward pressure on the price by taking Bitcoin out of the market. So that's manipulation that you can have on the way up effectively. And none of this would be considered illegal, but it is a financial weapon of mass destruction for the financial industrial complex. This subordinates Michael Saylor to the financial industrial complex, debt capital markets, equity capital markets, and it pulls Bitcoin out of the market. It removes Bitcoin from the float, but is all done via FIC underwriting. Is one of those players Jane Street? We should look deeply into that as well. It creates the ability to have unwind pressure whenever you need it. It doesn't mean you create an environment where strategy goes into chapter 11. You can get rid of the asset if you want. But there was that whole thing of inclusion in the S&P 500, not inclusion. And there were the different types of operations that we've seen. So I think MicroStrategy is a beautiful product for the financial industrial complex to engage in subordination and market manipulation. And we have seen ever more products that rely upon these synthetic derivatives, trading off volatility, and these types of operations that is driving a dividend in some of these products. It's a black box at this stage. Yes, you get public company disclosure, but you don't know how yield is being generated for these dividends, which relies upon, and this is the most speculated upon product in the derivative complex in the S&P. We also know that there was the creation of a new vehicle, 21 Capital. Jack Mallers had a reputation in the Bitcoin space. Was his family connected to commodities traders, structured via Cantor Fitzgerald. This is when I started warning about it, saying, Jack, do you know what you're getting into bed with? The liquidity is coming via investments from Tether, also Bank of Japan, SoftBank connections as well. And my bet is a potential roll-up strategy to acquire Strike, which is an app that allows you to acquire Bitcoin and borrow against your Bitcoin. It started to launch Bitcoin-backed loans. There were lots of margin calls as the price crashed around, this 10-10 operations. And so you can roll in Bitcoin-backed loans into another vehicle. This is another tool for the financial industrial complex when they need to push price manipulation in order to trigger margin calls, force liquidations, and then you can have this reflective unwind pressure on the downturn whenever it's needed. The third different vehicle that they've created, we saw Naka. And so basically it launched in May 2025. There was a stock market pump. I was warning everyone not to be involved in this. The price went from $2, which was a premium to the net asset value, the Bitcoin in there. And it went up to about $30+. Pipe investors were basically at $1.12. So launched at the $2-3, had that massive pump. You may have got a massive amount of selling there, dumping onto retail. We don't know. That was a market trade. But we got the dumping on there. And within 9 months, the price of Nakamoto has crashed 99% to approximately 29 cents. Now, I haven't looked at the price. There was several announcements that were built into. It was David Bailey that runs this. David Bailey came out and made some explanations this week after an article was published by Justin Belcher around what he thought was happening with Nakamoto. Now, there was in December, because the price goes below $1, you effectively become a penny stock, and you get Nasdaq delisting notices, and then you end up on the pink sheets and other markets. That was around December the 10th, 2025 that this happened. So what else do we know in order to try and protect the company? Well, $97 million of quarterly losses were published. It's behind on its latest publishing, saying that complexity of auditing operations, complexity of operations, because you can only publish things that will later be audited. We know that there was a debt spiral that included the following. Bitcoin was sold. So there was $290 million of convertible notes that were issued, $203 million of term loans, and $206 million USDT Tether bridge that was issued, and a $210 million Kraken loan based upon a collateral of 150% Bitcoin collateral. If you were involved in Celsius, you know that Tether issued a loan based upon client Bitcoin, and then they rug pulled that when the price crashed after Terra Luna, and there was a settlement in the Chapter 11 case that led to a recent distribution. So you have the same construct that's being built within Nakamoto. And so Naka then announces, and I got this bit wrong. I thought this was new news, so I said something on X. It turns out that it was in the original slide deck. So investors that actually read the prospectus would have known that this was going to happen. So the price is crashed, is laden up with debt. And so basically Nakamoto now work for the financial industrial complex. And so what does it acquire? It acquires Bitcoin Magazine, a news outlet for pushing out Bitcoin news. Now, it also acquires the company that's doing Bitcoin conferences. I was invited to Bitcoin Mena in December. Maybe I'll publish the recording. I don't think where I was talking about how you can achieve peace in the Middle East through Bitcoin strategic reserves and talking about the importance of self-custody. I'm sure it may not be invited to those again, but we've now got Bitcoin conferences where everyone was talking about Bitcoin treasury companies, stable coins, Bitcoin strategic reserves, centralizing forces. There was also a hedge fund called UTXO Management that David Bailey and his team were running. So now, through this pump and dump cycle, laden up with debt, subordinate to the financial industrial complex, Bitcoin was sold. You have a tool for price suppression. And now the media conferences, media plus the conferencing outlet and hedge fund are all tied into this Bitcoin treasury company wrapper. Then we also get, this could be a narrative layer. This is how the financial industrial complex uses short-term manipulation to corner markets and try and build the tools to fool you out of your Bitcoin, because what they really want is your Bitcoin held with them rather than your Bitcoin in self-custody, which is what I've been constantly warning about. And I told you the same thing that happened with Celsius and various other things will happen at the hedge fund level. Now we're starting to see it. And so we've got that market structure. What else happened? Adam Back went on news this week, and he's now pushing his Bitcoin treasury company. Adam Back, yes, the same Adam Back that created Blockstream. I covered this in Epstein files, what files were there. You can go to my blog and look at that. Andy Back went to visited Epstein Island. A vehicle was used to fund Blockstream, a company headed up by Adam Back. There was confirmation that he went to the island in the emails. That was the allegations. And we've had no talk about it since. But who was meant to be a cypherpunk previously, suddenly is like the biggest shield for Bitcoin treasury companies, stable coins, and his new company, BSTR. What is BSTR? Well, BSTR will be launching allegedly around about April. It's launching via a SPAC, which is where you take a public company and put your assets into it. I'm guessing maybe Blockstream will be rolled up into that. And who was the investment bank And the broker, of course, it was Cantor Equity Partners, headed by Brendan Lutnick, who's the son of Howard Lutnick. Howard Lutnick, who lied about his connection to Jeffrey Epstein, and is the holder of the treasuries for the stablecoin Tether, and was a neighbor of Jeffrey Epstein and managed to buy his house for like $10, according to the court documents and various other things. And now photos have come out with Howard Lutnick on the island, and he should be subpoenaed to answer questions for his connections to Jeffrey Epstein. And so now you have embedded potentially the Blockstream structure into a Bitcoin treasury company. Silicon Valley exits. Jeffrey Epstein allegedly was involved in a divestment operation. We don't know. That's what Adam Back said on X. And now potentially you've got a roll-up mechanism into this Bitcoin treasury company, which is why these Bitcoin treasury companies exist. And it's why I've been talking about, where I talked about, if you go to my episode on hijacking Bitcoin, that we should beware any developers that are inputting on the latest code debates. We should be worried about whether these are infiltration operations as well. Not saying they are, I'm just saying these are the things we should consider. So this may be a developer infiltration operation. So this is how you go from cypherpunk to stablecoin operation to Bitcoin strategic reserve to Wall Street shill. And these are the types of infiltration operations I've been warning about all along. So this is a structural pattern that we are starting to notice across the asset. This happened to gold. This happened to silver. This happened to oil. This happens to equities. And now it's happened to Bitcoin. What is the pattern? The pattern is that you financialize the assets through Wall Street wrappers that encourage you to not own it in self-custody, but to own it in custody. Then you layer different types of derivative products on top. Then you expand synthetic supply by creating paper Bitcoin over Bitcoin. Then you try and control the liquidity windows as much as possible. Then you harvest the volatility through this preferential regulatory arbitrage that doesn't require the disclosure. And then you benefit from the long position on the unwind, and you benefit from the short position during the harvesting. This is Jane Street's game. Jane Street is the largest holder of SLV, Bitcoin ETF, and is the largest holder of IBIT. But we don't have the transparency on the derivative liabilities and the derivative complex due to its private nature and its construct with off-balance sheet companies, as we saw in the Indian disclosure as well. So it is one of the most profitable trading firms globally in the world. It is an authorized participant inside the ETF plumbing, and this is the same structure that exists with a different asset. So can we categorically prove that the price increase and the price suppression is responsible due to Jane Street? What I know is that you can only do that on the short term, and they have built the construct to manipulate the short-term price. Long term, if you hold Bitcoin in self-custody, they have to cover those trades, and we don't know the full extent of all the allegations of whether it can actually be true. And it seems that it might get a level of US protection, which implies to me that is a strategic counterparty, and it's a member of the financial industrial complex. And let's see, we got the disclosures outside the US. Let's see if we get the disclosures in the US. Remember, I've always said that Bitcoin is not under attack by this at the protocol level. It is basically why? Because the way that Bitcoin was set up is you have nodes that set the rules. You have miners that secure the network. You have developers that propose the changes. And so when miners are including the new blocks into the blockchain, and developers propose something that they want to change. It's the nodes that enforce the rules, and that's exactly what we're going through right now. And the only people that get a say, that protect the network, are the people that own Bitcoin in self-custody and run nodes. There are 25,000 nodes all around the world, and the mining is a decentralized network. And so please listen if you're going to be involved in this, and it's a very important sovereign protection layer. Listen to my previous episode. I did one last week where I go through the different types of, I went through the whole Celsius thing, various other things. The one before that, the week before that, was whether Bitcoin is hijacking because we're in the FUD cycle. That cycle to make you sell your Bitcoin was brutal, and I've seen nothing that changes the structural element of Bitcoin that implies the entire ecosystem is hijacked. In fact, it demonstrates that Bitcoin is working. So watch the Hijacking Bitcoin episode if you haven't done that. Go to my blog, SimonDixon.com, and you can see these different episodes. Also, watch my CIA episode. Was Bitcoin created by a CIA? Who is Satoshi Nakamoto? And you can see that these misinformation is used in order to scare you into selling your Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is always under pressure. And now they moved, which I warned you against through the Wall Street mechanism, is to apply the pressure at the leverage layer to get you to sell your Bitcoin. So what is the solution? We can't beat the financial industrial complex because they have the whole socialize the losses, privatize the gains, change it from QT to QE. We've unearthed the different layers. So what is the solution for us? Well, the solution for you is not to believe that this isn't something you should be involved in and you don't get to boycott like I've always been talking about. You boycott by doing a structural withdrawal over time. This is why we self-custody Bitcoin, and I've always talked about that. This is why we run nodes if you want to protect the network and engage in the debates of enforcing the rules so that they never change. And that is even because of the block size war that we made it trivial and inexpensive for people to run nodes. That was the whole essence of the debate. This is why I've always said, don't borrow against your Bitcoin unless you're doing it in a very risk managed way. If you have to, I understand reality kicks in. This is not perfection. This is about being better, but never put yourself in a position where you lose all your Bitcoin by borrowing against it and then leveraging up and buying more Bitcoin. And now you're a collateralized debt obligation subjected to the whims of price movement. This is why I say don't trade, avoid leverage. You don't get yourself in a position where you can be subjected to the short-term price manipulation. This is why I say avoid derivatives. Just boycott them altogether. This is why I say don't use wrap Bitcoin in another layer through a DeFi contract in a network that's controlled by Silicon Valley through pre-mined shitcoins that pretend that they're decentralized, just like Terra Luna did. This is why I don't ask people to guess where the top is, where the bottom is, because you're not in the inside like I was when I was a market maker. This is why I say accumulate regardless of price by owning more Bitcoin this month than the previous month. And this is why I personally refuse, and I recommend people to personally refuse, systemic float of Bitcoin financial weapons and mass destruction. This is why I say don't trade, because you have to leave it in the exchange. This is why I say don't shitcoin, because you're taking an insecure proof of work network or exchanging it for proof of stake, where the ETF provider can govern the network by actually owning the coin, and the Silicon Valley pre-mined operations. They are all connected to the financial industrial complex, and they control the paper instruments, which means they control the short-term price, which means that they control it. And there ain't nothing you can do about it unless you're going to be on the inside and grow bigger as well. So don't try and out-trade them. That's the message. You want to out-invest them. And out-investing means it's the great equalizer, because you don't care about price. You have a long-term strategy, For the next decade, you know what the game is, the macro game, the geopolitical game, and your position is to do what everybody can do. And that is, be the spot liquidity that they eventually will need and they'll try and get from you. And you'll put your finger up and say, how much are you willing to pay? Because that's what happened with silver. That's what's happening with gold. And that's what will likely happen with Bitcoin as well. So Jane Street cannot print Bitcoin. They can only print derivatives and synthetic versions of Bitcoin. When enough Bitcoin exits and when enough Bitcoin is custodial, as the majority is today, then just exit the derivative plumbing and they'll want your Bitcoin from you. And when they need it at a rush, it will be at a higher price because the synthetic float ratio collapses when people realize they need self-custody. And that is the idea behind Bitcoin. And that is why they try to hijack it. And the structure of it is why it's resilient and there's nothing else like it as well. So when you need Bitcoin in self-custody, paper falls and the real price emerges because you need to settle these on the other side. And I personally, as I've said in the geopolitical section and the macro section, I believe that they want to use this as a negotiation, as a tool when they transition to a multipolar world. So that's everything I've got for you on part one. And I hope you agree that I go into the detail. We don't want to engage in shallow conversations. We don't want to engage in propaganda. I have no interest in hiding the truth, making things sound better or worse than they are. I only care about accuracy so you can make the right decisions in a time and an environment where everybody's lying to you. So in part two, now that we've got through the technical issues, I want you to understand. And so I did an interview with an early developer in Bitcoin called Amir Taaki. If you're a long-term listener, you'll know that I said that Amir Taaki was targeted by Jeffrey Epstein and he took some funding into his company, which I got wrong. I corrected that on the record and I wanted to invite Amir Taaki to share his version of events. I'm not endorsing Amir Taaki. And I was invited by Suleiman Ahmed, who was grilling him and asking some hard questions. And we wanted to do this for a reason. And I'm going to be playing this for you for a reason, because I was asked to co-host so that I could ask the difficult question. And Amir Taaki agreed to do that because he wanted to share his story. And I corrected the mistakes that I made in my last interview. And I wanted to do that publicly, to be fair as well. And I basically asked him about his experience being contacted by Jeffrey Epstein. And he revealed things that no one knows in terms of who he thinks went to the island. I can't endorse it. I can't verify it. All we did is gave him a platform to say it, and then we asked the question. We also grilled him on bad behaviors. You can make the decisions. But what I want you to understand is watch this from the perspective of when you have bad behaviors, that is used as leverage. And that leverage pushes you into a network of working for greater power. I want you to become invincible to it by understanding how these operations worked. I also wanted him to share his experience of actually going to Syria, fighting ISIS, and we asked him the hard questions because we know that ISIS is connected to Mossad, but we also know that elements of the Syrian factions were guarding the oil in Syria and are connected to Department of Defense funded operations. And he was part of those battles. And so we asked him the hard question as well as sharing his experience as well on that. And we also asked him around his questions around early Bitcoin investors, the ones that Satoshi Nakamoto handed over to, the CIA, Peter Todd, Gavin Andreessen. And this is not to add a judgment, it's to help you understand how infiltration operations may or may not work. I'm not making allegations. I'm not making anything. I'm just saying I want you to have the information so that you can have a warning between, the tension of sovereign individuals and the desire to leverage you, and how potentially the developer infiltrations work. And then when you watch my posts like hijacking Bitcoin, how you can realize and not fall for the narrative when companies like alleged companies like Jane Street might use their media narrative, derivative complex, treasury complex, in order to try and get you to sell your Bitcoin. And so you can limit your exposure and how to avoid it. So that's everything I wanted to cover in depth on this topic, so that when everyone asks, I can give them the information. And I got a feeling we're going to see certain things in the court, or it's going to be protected, but we're going to be smarter either way. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to move over to part 2. Part 2 is called Amir Taaki Reveals, who was an early Bitcoin developer. And we go through Epstein, contact, and some of the attempts to infiltrate and compromise Bitcoin developers from his experience. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to get set up and put the screen share on. Do me a favor. While I'm doing that, please like, share, add a comment, help me with the algorithm, so we can get more and more people that are geeky and interested in these types of things. And then I'm going to play the interview. We're going to do it at 1.5x speed. And then we're going to end it from there. So I hope you enjoy the interview. There are things in this interview that have never been revealed. And so bear with it and watch it till the end. And then we'll publish it on our blog if you want to share it with other people. But just make sure you subscribe to my channel. Follow me on X. Follow me on Rumble in case my channel gets rug pulled. Subscribe to my completely free membership portal on SimonDixon.com, where we back up all the videos and publish all the content. And maybe if you want to download this, because they're long form content, you can download it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify in case you want to do it on the move while you're driving or in the gym or any of those other things. I'm also on Noster, and I'm going to now get the video ready. And I'll see you next week on Simon Dixon Hard Talk Live. Enjoy the interview.
Epstein funding, which we didn't. So I don't mind. You can say whatever you want. That's cool. You can put whatever. You can say you don't believe me, but if you quote me, it's good to quote me as actually what I was saying. So that's the only issue I have. I don't have any issue with anything else. People are free to their own opinion.
Yeah, and that's just a minor point of clarification. But Simon, if you want to jump in,
not minor. Let's tell you about that, because most people, and you know this, most people don't go check out the source info. They'd be like, oh, okay, Simon said that. That's what happened. So that's why it's important to use the facts to build whatever narrative, but also like the facts are represented authentically. But I don't have any issue with anything else. If you're claiming on CIA, whatever, it's okay. As long as
we will come to that. But let Simon jump in here. Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, let me just start with the background. So this is live, right?
Yeah, it's live now.
Okay, cool. All right. So I met Amir Taaki at the first Bitcoin conference in Europe in 2011, where I was invited to be a speaker, and that was your conference, right, Amir? You organized it?
Yeah, the 2011 and the 2012 one.
Yeah,
I think look at both of them.
I definitely spoke at the 2011 one, and I think I also saw you at some conferences in London back in like the Mike Hearn days and things like that. And,
both of those.
Yeah,
so the 2012 one.
Yeah. So that's our background. I obviously I care about Bitcoin. So as soon as Bitcoin was mentioned in the Epstein files, I pretty much stayed up for about 48 hours analyzing all the different files. And in midst of that, I was getting out all the emails. I was trying to put together an understanding. And in that, Solomon invited me to come onto his channel, and this was in the midst of like the 3 million drop. Everyone was trying to figure out what's going on, and so I was really focusing in on that. And then when I noticed that Jeffrey Epstein had contacted Amir Taaki, I looked on Amir Taaki's post to see whether he'd responded to it, and I saw his post and his response. I made an error in Solomon's interview with me, which was it originally went out on Solomon's channel. I was going through Coinbase, I was going through Blockstream, I was going through MIT, I was going through Digital Currency Initiative, I was going through Peter Thiel's emails, and I made something which I think Amir Taaki genuinely can take contention with, because I said in his response that he confirmed he had received funding from Jeffrey Epstein, which was completely false, completely inaccurate. Now, Amir contacted me saying via Ray Youssef, why are you lying? And you can believe me or not, but I wasn't actually lying. I misrepresented.
It's okay.
Yeah. That's the background. I misrepresented it, and then what I did is I immediately went on Suleiman's space and corrected it, which Suleiman can confirm.
That's right, yeah.
And then I went on my YouTube channel to make sure that all my listeners, which was a larger audience that would know about Bitcoin, knew that I made that mistake. And I did it at the beginning of the video and the end of the video, because I do actually think it's a very bad thing to misrepresent. And I apologize for that misrepresentation. It was my mistake. Everything else I can't vouch for, because we want to get Amir on here to talk about things that I don't know about, and he's going to share, and we're going to ask some questions, and he gets to say things in his words. But I can't vouch for any of it because I don't know anything about it other than what Amir says and what other people might say.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you so much. That's okay.
So let's get into that. And this is what you're talking about in terms of the Epstein files. You're talking about your engagement or interaction with Epstein. So first of all, if you want to explain, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but is it Jason Calacanis?
Yeah, Jason Calacanis.
What's his relationship with you?
I don't know. Like, he just invited me on his podcast once with Gavin Andresen. That was like the very first Bitcoin podcast that happened.
Okay.
That was it. I thought he was a cool guy because he was in the video, he was going, "Oh, I love you guys. Yo, you're amazing, blah, blah." So then I was shocked actually to see his email with Epstein where he's telling Epstein, these guys are bad news, stay away from them. Talking about me and Gavin Andresen. So that was surprising. But yeah, I thought he was all right.
I don't know which email you're referring to there in terms of saying your bad news. Maybe you can elaborate on that one. The one I've got here is Jeffrey Epstein writes to Jason Calacanis and says, quote, "I would like to get," and Simon, if you can elaborate on who this guy is. I believe he's that famous guy, right? Jason Calacanis. I think I know him.
So what you said, he was your business partner, is that correct, Amir? Or you had?
Yeah. Jason Calacanis.
Yes.
My business partner was Donald Norman, which is also in the email. And you can see after he visits the island, he actually sends a reply.
All right, starting right at the beginning. So let's make sure we know who everyone is. So Jason Calacanis was emailing Jeffrey Epstein, and you went on his podcast. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that still like live? People can look it up from back in the day.
Actually, he's deleted it, but there's a backup of it, and I've seen the backup, and I actually have a copy of the backup. It's called This Week in Startups, and it's Gavin Andresen and Amir Taaki. That was the very first.
So he's like
Jason Calacanis is the guy from All In Podcast, correct?
Yeah, he's like a VC, I don't know, say Silicon Valley investor, and he likes to talk about new technologies.
Okay.
And
so this email I've got, let me read this, and maybe Simon's got some questions for you. Jeffrey Epstein emails Jason Calacanis, who is part of the All In Podcast. I believe it's him and like 3 other guys, and Elon Musk has been on it very recently. And the Epstein emails and says, "I would like to get in touch with the Bitcoin guys. I'm happy to see you doing well." Now, when he says the Bitcoin guys, it does seem to suggest that there was previous interaction where he possibly relayed some names to him, or it could be just bad English, both are possible. But Epstein replies to Jason and says, "Hey pal, running out to a kid's birthday party. We'll dig up their info. So you know, there are folks who are not trying to build a business. They are crazy open source folks who are radical. Their motivation is more in line with Wikipedia or WikiLeaks. I had these guys on my TV show on the web, YouTube Startups, and Gavin Andresen and Amir Taaki, Bitcoin." So he mentioned you. So I think that's what you're referring to in terms of a negative light. But Simon, you have some questions?
Yeah.
What date is that?
This is 6th of, well, it's either 6th of April 2011 or the 4th of June 2011, depending on if it's the American style of the
So this is consistent with if you were around in 2011, like Gavin Andresen was the lead developer of Bitcoin. Amir Taaki had, been kind of somebody that was publicly talking about Bitcoin, and I think you were invited to BBC and stuff like that, right, Amir? Yeah.
Yeah. So I had like a lot of people emailing me all the time, a lot of big media. Not in that time, but afterwards, yes. In that time when Epstein emailed me, I was getting a lot of email. I was running the second biggest exchange as well on the market after MTGOX. So, initial reaction, you get.
Let's start with those early interactions. So you got into Bitcoin.
But just before we do, just for a point of clarification, because I think that's really.
I was running the second biggest exchange as well on the market after MTGOX.
Is the guy from All In Podcast, correct?
Yeah, he's like a.
So there are folks who are not trying to build
a lot of big media. Not in that time, but afterwards, yes. In that time when Epstein emailed me, I was getting a lot of email. I was running the second biggest exchange as well on the market after MTGOX. So, initial reaction, you get.
Let's start with those early interactions. So you got into Bitcoin. You were interacting with Bitcoin core developers? Is that correct?
Actually, when I got into Bitcoin, Bitcoin was pretty much worthless, and there was only 5 of us, which was me, Gavin Andresen, Jeff Garzik, Neil Schneider, and Sipa, Peter Willer. Those were the main 5 around Bitcoin. And actually, our names were listed on Bitcoin.org.
Yeah, and you were in London at the time, and then you started. Is that correct?
Actually, I think when Epstein, no, I think I was in London afterwards. When Epstein emailed us, we had an office in Warsaw in Poland. That was when we were running the exchange. Later, I moved to London. Was after we dissolved that business.
Yeah. So you weren't actually a Bitcoin core developer, but you were hanging around with the Bitcoin core developers, or it was just Gavin Andresen and Jeff Garzik and people like that.
Actually, I did initially start working on Bitcoin. But I started to come into a conflict with Gavin Andresen because Gavin Andresen had a very fundamental different idea of what Bitcoin should be. He was like, he saw Bitcoin as a startup and he wanted to get big banks. He wanted to get it integrated into he saw it as a payments innovation. He saw it as his own personal startup, whereas I saw it as an open source project, freedom money. And because also he acquired this status as like, you know, he actually called himself chief scientist. Nobody gave him that title. He like anointed himself. And then he felt threatened by other people like me climbing up the ranks, and he started to try and shut me out of development. So initially, I was actually working on Bitcoin, but he kept blocking all of my work. And so we actually forked Bitcoin initially. But then later, after we were working on the fork, then we actually started to work on our own rewrite of Bitcoin. And actually, that's where I started also the BIP process and also developed the first anonymity techniques on Bitcoin, CoinJoin and stealth addresses. So I was actually working on Bitcoin code very heavily. In fact, that was the main thing I was working on. And it was actually the main reason why we shut down that business was because I was actually running an exchange, which now I look back on it and I'm like, well, that was really stupid because being a Bitcoin developer, there is no money in being a Bitcoin developer. In fact, it's negative EV. You're working on Bitcoin, you're contributing value to Bitcoin. There's no way to capture value back. But having like the biggest exchange on the market, that is massively EV. But I closed it down because it literally just became me going to bank meetings all the time. And I actually wanted to work on Bitcoin technology, which I saw as more impactful. So that's like a bit of context.
Let me just get a few details there. So when you were working on Bitcoin, how many people had like commit access and maintainer access? Was that Gavin Andresen, Jeff Garzik? Did you have one, or did other people?
I can't remember, honestly. It's so long ago.
Okay. But then you forked off the project and started
kind of like what. Also, I actually had. You can find a web archive. It's called BitcoinMedia.com, and you can see articles actually from that period, from the Epstein period. Well, we're calling it the Epstein period now, but that period, 2011, early 2011, where I'm actually writing about stuff happening in Bitcoin. One of the articles is about Gavin Andresen trying to push through this like major protocol change in Bitcoin that me and Luke Jr. So Luke Jr. was also around then, and actually it was me and Luke Jr. who were both trying to push back against what was happening. So even though a lot of people now they don't like Luke Jr., I still have a lot of respect for him because he was someone that always was very kind of ideological and like you know, kind of.
So let me get this right because it becomes really relevant. It's really interesting. So from your perspective, you had an ideological battle with Gavin Andresen. For those that don't know, Gavin Andresen was the developer that Satoshi Nakamoto kind of handed the project over to. You didn't actually commit any code to the version of the code that Gavin Andresen was working on, but there was an ideological difference and you were more aligned with Luke Dash Jr. And what about Jeff Garzik? Was he kind of on Gavin Andresen's side or where you guys went?
I have a lot of respect for Jeff Garzik, but yes, this divide was more broadly the Bitcoin Foundation and, you know, then us. Later, what happened is then the dark wallet happened much later. And we kind of drew a line in the sand and it kind of snowballed and it became an open conflict. But then I left to Syria and it actually ended up with...
Let's not go there yet. So I just want to get this correct. So okay. Gavin Andresen, in your words, had more of a corporate bank integrated kind of ideology for what Bitcoin should be. Get some Silicon Valley funding, maybe put a corporate layer around it. Don't focus on privacy because DigiCash couldn't function without the banks. Would you frame that as what Gavin Andresen was pushing for?
It's a bit of a simplification, but broadly, yes. Because, for example, I made the Bitcoin 2011, 2012 conferences. They then stole that. And they made the Bitcoin 2013 conference. But the headline of the Bitcoin 2013 conference was Bitcoin Payments Innovation. So that was kind of like a dig at the earlier two Bitcoin conferences, which had speakers like, you know, Rick Falkvinger, Birgitta, Cody, Max Kaiser, people that were like more on the ideological side of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But they kind of understood. So just to explain their mindset, they would often say things like, I'm a libertarian, but a libertarian in secret. So they didn't wear their politics necessarily. They kind of were like, oh, in the day, I work with, big banks and corporations, but actually what I'm doing is I'm infiltrating them. I don't know if they honestly believe that or if that's a hope that they told themselves. But then we can see the consequence of that kind of ideology in crypto, and what it led to was just like a corporate hijacking of crypto. So a lot of the Blockstream guys who later filled that vacuum after the Bitcoin Foundation was destroyed, they ended up taking on that mantle, that role. And so, that's the cool group of people who like continued that kind of thing.
Yeah, interesting. So basically, because there was evidence in the Epstein files that Jeffrey Epstein wanted that introduction that Solomon read out in the beginning to who were the Bitcoin people. From your perspective, how do you interpret that? Do you interpret that he already had a relationship with Bitcoin people, or do you interpret that he was just coming into the fold and he was trying to figure out who's who?
I honestly don't know, but from my perspective, probably he was like, oh, Bitcoin is a new thing because he's very connected to the tech people. So he's like, yo, Jason, put me in touch with the Bitcoin guys. And so Jason's like, okay, these two guys on my show, and sends him them, And then then he has this conversation with Donald, and you can see Donald's reply to it, where Epstein says something about serious misgivings about Bitcoin, but then from Donald's reply, we can kind of see probably it was about money laundering. He's like, oh, money laundering is the big issue around Bitcoin. So I don't know what that conversation.
From your perspective, what do you think Jeffrey Epstein was interested in? Do you think he was interested in kind of like a VC, interesting from an operation, interested from maybe using it for illegal activities? Or have you got any perspective?
Honestly, don't know. Probably, I don't know. You probably know better than I do.
Well, I've got an opinion, but we'd love to see what you're thinking. So, all right, so let's I think he tried to infiltrate as many parts of the community as he could, and I think he was also interested in using it. But so this seems to be the first. Any emails prior to this, like they're fake ones, where it was like Epstein as Satoshi Nakamoto. These were all fake ones. They're not in the actual files. They just circulated on Twitter. This looked like the first one. So he wanted to meet yourself and Gavin Andresen. Gavin Andresen allegedly declined the meeting. Do you have any reason to believe otherwise? Did he meet Jeffrey Epstein?
No, I'm not going to say he didn't. I honestly don't. I don't know anything about what Gavin Andresen.
Okay, so you know nothing about what happened between. Yeah, but you had a business. So at the time, you said you forked off a project. You were focusing on privacy. You later created CoinJoin with Luke Dash Jr. Is that correct?
No. I don't want to get. It's too complicated, that story. But
okay.
Yes. Like.
You sure you don't want to tell it? It's actually very relevant because the Market Samurai guys are kind of in jail right now, and the Trump administration is putting.
Hey, like if you want to know, I created with Peter Todd. And Peter Todd actually turned out to be working with an agent. And he was meant to be the chief scientist of Dark Web. But I don't want to get, that is a really interesting story.
I think it's really relevant. So Solomon, do you mind if we go here? It might get a bit technical, but most people don't know these details.
Honestly, I thought if I go too deep into that, you'll be like, oh, he's trying to distract from the Epstein stuff. But if you want to go into Peter Todd, that stuff is fascinating. All
right, so hold on. Let's get this in order. So
let's do this. In terms of the Peter Todd story, Simon, do remember about it, and we'll come into it because it's more technical. I do want to go through some of the interactions and engagements he had. Amir Taaki with Jeffrey Epstein. I'm looking at an email from the 7th of July. So is there anything you got questions from a questions perspective, Simon, before the 7th of July? Because I do want to ask about these emails.
Yeah, okay, we'll go into that. I just want one more question. You said that you and your business partner had a business. My question is, what was that business? And then you said that your business partner met with Jeffrey Epstein to potentially find about securing funding. What was the purpose of that meeting? And then you said that he came back and said we shouldn't take that funding. What was the extent of, like, when you were searching Jeffrey Epstein's name, was it clear he is who he is? Those are my three questions on that part.
Yeah. So was the first was about my
what was the business? So you had a business partner. Was that
the business doing? Okay, yeah. So the business was called Bitcoin Consultancy. And I actually, in the Jason Calacanis podcast, I actually talk about the business that we're doing. And I talk about our plans for the business. And actually, interestingly, one of the plans for the business was to form a Bitcoin foundation. So you can see where Gavin Andreessen and other guys got the idea was from us. That was our plan. But actually, it was firstly a consultancy to help drive adoption of Bitcoin by businesses. It was also running the exchange, which was the biggest UK exchange on the market, second biggest after MTGOX. Originally it was called Bitcoin, later rebranded to Intersango. That was why we were running out of Warsaw, because we turned from being a Bitcoin exchange in the UK to being an international exchange. And then thirdly, we were working on Bitcoin code. So like writing this Bitcoin implementation, which is still around. It's actually the fastest Bitcoin implementation, which is Lit Bitcoin. Now it's actually run by Eric Voskuil. So that's broadly the business. Now, what happened?
An incorporated company.
Yeah. It actually had many companies, which is usual.
Okay.
Right?
Where were they incorporated? Was it which country?
UK, actually.
So it's a UK limited company. Is it like if you looked it up on Companies House, you'll see it under the name of. What was the name? Bitcoin Consulting.
Okay, Bitcoin Consultancy was one company, but for example, the exchange, we kept having to make new companies because the banks were very hostile to us, and the banks kept shutting down our bank accounts. So we kept having to make new companies and spam the banks to try and open accounts to use it for our exchange. So it started getting very difficult. And so we have like loads of companies. I can't remember, like Interrompi, Intersango, into this, into that. I can't remember. In England it costs
and
$10.
So when you were seeking funding, was that primarily for the exchange and an alternative implementation of Bitcoin?
Actually, we weren't actively seeking funding. The main thing that we were seeking is because our bank accounts kept getting shut down for the exchange, which is a big issue because what would happen would be the exchange would be running and suddenly the bank would just close the account. And then we'd panic and randomly they just say, your account is closed. And then 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, they would send us a check in the mail. We've got a piece of paper, a check. We have to find now a new bank account. We have to quickly open a new bank account, deposit the check, integrate the bank account into our web systems. So we can, because it's reading the deposits from the bank account and doing the withdrawal, etc. We have to do all that, and it was a nightmare. It was literally like a full-time job, just doing that. And so what we were interested in was people with connections who could get us a bank account, who could allow us to operate without being shut down all the time.
And was that the essence of the meeting with Jeffrey Epstein, to figure out whether he could help you with banking, or what do you think it was?
So we actually had like meetings with various people, like lawyers and stuff like that, head of a bank, etc. We even met with like a major, what's it called, like a telecom company in South Africa, one of the big five ones, one of the big ones.
What about the meeting with Jeffrey Epstein? What was that? What was the premise of that? Was it just to talk about Bitcoin? Was it to get funding? Was it to get a bank account?
So it was Epstein emailed us, and first thing I do is I look him up on Wikipedia. I'm like, oh, the guy's a billionaire. I didn't think much beyond that, but there was a small, like a sentence. He didn't have much on the Wikipedia. You can probably go back and find it, right? It was like literally like a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs, and one of them said he has allegations, of child stuff. And I'm stupid. I'm like young and 21, and I was like, oh, he's a billionaire. My co-founder, he was the one actually that said, bro, this like not good,
Yeah, how soon?
So anyway,
after that was that. So how soon after your engagement with Epstein and you look him up on Wikipedia, does your co-founder then come to you and say, this guy's not a good guy?
Well, I'm getting to that, but let me. So this was like our initial conversation actually. But I was like, "Oh, he's a billionaire." But my co-founder was like, let's be a bit cautious. So anyway, then I replied back. So then he's actually in New York, my co-founder, unrelated to Epstein, and that's when I email Epstein back. The one where I'm like, "Oh, I tried to call you, it didn't get through." My co-founder's in New York. If you want, you can meet him. So my co-founder goes to check him out. I don't know what happened in that meeting, if anything happened,
how do you not know?
Then later,
wait 1 second. How do you not know what happened in the meeting? He's your co-founder.
I mean, but I didn't really question him that much. Like, he came back. We're very busy. It's not something I was interested in that much. He comes back.
I mean, that makes sense. Just a question. That doesn't make sense because you're like a young 21.
It does make.
And let me explain to you.
Let me just. If I finish, it'll be clear.
Yeah.
So he comes back and he goes, "No, this guy's bad news." He just kills it. He stops it. I go, okay, he's the business guy, I'm the dev, so I trust his judgment, and that was that. We're so busy, we're doing loads of shit. I never thought about it ever again. Later, Epstein did email me, which you can see in the archives. But I never responded to him after that. That was the end of it. My co-founder said it's dead. Okay, it's like that's it.
So I'm gonna come to the email in a second.
I don't know what the co-founder really, if he saw something. I wonder about that now.
What's his name again?
Donald Norman. You can see him in the email as well. He replies back after the meeting with Epstein, talking about money laundering.
Are you still in touch with Donald?
Kinda. He's actually suing me. We're in a court case.
Okay. I just want to bring this back one second, if you can hear me. I know some people are saying my mic's a bit low, but what I don't get is this claim that you're making that you're a 21-year-old, as you said quite rightly, a billionaire comes and speaks to you, you get excited, and so how do you go from that being excited? He goes to a meeting with your founder, and you don't know the specifics of how the conversation occurred.
I mean, my founder is the business guy, and he's doing business. We didn't really talk about it that much.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Okay. Let me just read this email that you're referring to for the audience. So on June the 12th, and hopefully people can hear me a lot better now. On June the 12th, basically Epstein writes an email to you, I presume, and says www.jeffreyepstein.org. Amir, the Bitcoin idea is brilliant, but I suggest has some serious downsides, as I'm sure you are aware. If you can find time, please call my office. So this is on June the 12th. What is this Bitcoin idea that you asked him for? I told him about that he thought was brilliant. And what's the exchange before that? Because quite clearly there's some interaction, engagement, conversations that happened before this.
No, it's all just on the email. There's no other interaction. And also, I think he's just talking about Bitcoin, the Bitcoin idea. I don't think he's talking about any particular idea.
Do we have the email before this? Because quite clearly this isn't the start. Simon, I don't know if you're aware, but quite clearly this isn't the start of a conversation. He's talking about you relaying an idea that he believes to be brilliant. What is this idea that he believes to be brilliant, and where do you relay this idea to him?
I don't know. Honestly, I think he's just talking about Bitcoin. I mean, that's just like.
So you don't know the idea that you relate to him? That was brilliant.
I don't know. Link the email in the chat. Let me read it.
Yeah, sure. Let me see how I saved that for 2026. Okay. I want to put it on here. And guys,
can you put it on the screen? Can you put it on the screen, Salman, or you can't do that?
No, I'm going to do it now. And as you all know, I'm not the most technological advanced. So, Amir, even if you don't like what I say here, don't try and hack me, bro.
Honestly, I'm not bothered. The history is what it is. I'm just giving the facts.
Yeah.
Believe it or don't believe.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're here to get down to the bottom of, right? 2:15.
And honestly, I was actually in favor of, taking his money. But luckily, my co-founder had the business smarts and was like, no, stay away from him. He's bad news. So it shows you.
So he did he wanted to invest in the business.
Pardon?
So when you said you were in favor of taking the money, he did confirm that he wanted to invest in the business.
No, he didn't. He didn't propose anything. It's just I was like, oh, billionaire.
Okay, so I've got the email on there. You can see the email at the bottom. That's the email I'm referring to. It says, Amir, the Bitcoin idea is brilliant. What's this Bitcoin idea that is brilliant?
It's Bitcoin. If you look at Donald Norman's reply to that, I don't remember exactly, but I think I CC'd this to Donald. And so Donald replied back. Or Donald replied back afterwards later to something else. But anyway, Donald's addressing the Bitcoin idea. If you find that email, it will make it more clear for you, maybe.
So the reason I'm asking you the question, and hopefully the audio is better, let me know. But the reason I'm asking the question is because that engagement or that email at the bottom, you can see on the what we can see at the bottom, quite clearly seems to show that you've had either one, if not more, conversations directly with Jeffrey Epstein. But you're saying you don't remember those conversations.
No, I'm not saying I don't remember. I said I have never talked with Jeffrey Epstein. I've never. You can see here I was trying to get a phone call with him. I didn't manage to get a phone call with him.
I'm not talking about the email above. We're gonna come on to that. I'm talking about the email at the bottom, which is the June 12th email. On the June 12th email, 2011, he says, Amir, the Bitcoin idea is brilliant. but I suggest has some serious downsides, as I'm sure you're aware. If you can find time, please call my office. Now, I'm not asking about what happened after that. We're going to come to that. I'm saying that quite clearly suggests that something happened before. There was a conversation. We don't know what the email is, if there was an email or not. I'm not sure if you know, Simon, but there quite clearly has been some kind of engagement where you relate some ideas, you relate some thoughts, and
it's not clear. Okay.
That's why you're here to explain that to us, because you're the person we're talking about.
First, the email, it shows that I haven't met him IRL yet. I haven't had a phone call with him. But what you're implying is maybe there was some other channel where we were communicating that wasn't these emails. But what I'm saying is, first of all, back then, I only used email. I didn't use, I don't know what even there was back then, MSN Messenger. But I literally just used email in 2011. That was my sole means. An IRC. But I don't think Jeffrey Epstein used IRC.
Okay, so why I'm asking the question is because it just makes no sense to me, because if you look at what the sentence is saying, you did relay some kind of idea to him. Now, this, unless he's creating this from the figment of his imagination, which I doubt, quite clearly there's been a conversation before that where you said you had some kind of engagement. Now, you're saying you didn't have that engagement, but then this email makes no sense.
What can I say? You can read it however you want to read it. But I'm saying...
I'm not being mean, but I'm not reading it how I want to read it. I'm reading it as a statement which quite clearly...
Tell me what you think.
No, it's not what I think, Amir. It literally says, Amir, the Bitcoin idea is brilliant. So if you say something to me now and I'm like, guess what, Amir, what you just said is brilliant. I've said it based on something that you said to me before this. So that's
so just a quick question. Is this the first email that he sends me? Or is it like, is there other emails before this? Because I haven't actually checked all the emails.
Well, from my understanding it is, but Simon can clarify. Simon, is this the first email that he sends, Amir?
Yeah, this is the first one I've seen. I haven't seen any others.
So he's just reaching out and he's going, Amir, the Bitcoin idea is brilliant. I mean, Bitcoin's new back then. So it's not Bitcoin. Nowadays, maybe if you said the Bitcoin idea, people are like, which Bitcoin idea? But you're talking about 2011. Nobody's heard of Bitcoin. So when you talk about the Bitcoin idea, they're like, the Bitcoin idea. Okay. But okay, if you don't believe it, don't believe it. But this is my point of view. And I've got nothing to say about that. Okay. That's it.
Okay. I mean, just to be altruistic, or to be, very like as altruistic as we can be based on this email, if I read this normally, it seems to me like there was some kind of engagement. But if I was to read it very altruistically, it could mean that he means, oh, guess what? The idea of Bitcoin is brilliant, and he's just very bad at sentence structure. So there is a possibility it could mean that. But to me, when I read it normally, and I just want to be as fair as possible, I'm not here to try and, but to me, it does seem like there was some kind of engagement before that, just reading the email.
And I'll add, in 2011, nobody knew what Bitcoin is. And so I think what Amir is saying is consistent, like in terms of how people might have communicated at that time.
Yeah. So it then says, hello, Jeffrey. This is now about 4 weeks later, you reply. And you say, we did not get a meet. Sorry.
It's like a 21-year-old, how a 21-year-old writes when they're like new and fresh. And they go, hello, Jeff. I'm Amir Taaki.
Yeah,
Bitcoin.
Yeah.
He's like, literally put my title as Bitcoin.
Yeah, fair enough. I understand that. And you are quite young at that time, right? Now it says, and so you're 21 at that time, right? You saying?
I mean, I was born in 88, so we can calculate it. My math is not like
2023, yeah. Okay. So he says, quote, we did not get a meeting arranged yet with your secretary. Again, I presume you mean that you didn't try to. Nonetheless, one of the members of our group is now in. Sorry.
Cool. I tried to call his secretary. You see, he's giving a phone number. I think that blacked out bit is a telephone number.
Right.
So he's like saying, and I tried to call. I don't know if I tried to call once or more times. I honestly don't remember. Actually, like reading emails, like a lot of stuff I forgot came back to me. But
which is fair enough. It has been 12 years, and you've been through a lot since then, so that's fair enough.
He called, and then that's me going, oh, my co-founder, which I could call one of the members of our group, is in New York. And so I gave my co-founder contact, and my co-founder in New York, but actually went to the island and did visit Epstein. And then after that came back to Poland where we were based.
Okay. And so the second email you've already explained, because you said that your co-founder did indeed meet Jeffrey Epstein. Where did he meet him? At Epstein's, which place of Epstein did he meet him?
I think the islands. He said he went to an island.
So your co-founder went to Jeffrey Epstein's island to meet Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
So he
That's what I'm saying. When he came back, he just was like, no. We're like, and he stopped it. He's like, no, we don't want to talk with Jeffrey Epstein. That's why I wonder You know, I'm like wondering like if something happened or he saw something. Maybe not. But
Okay, so your co-founder didn't meet him in New York, is what I thought you meant first, but your co-founder actually went to Epstein Island to meet him. How long was your co-founder in Epstein Island?
I don't know. Not long. I think he just kind of
a day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Like how long?
Like probably like a few hours or something.
What?
Honestly,
what?
Huh?
Sorry, do continue.
I mean, I didn't really question in depth, but I think it was a brief meeting.
I just I don't understand that bit. Like he flew to Jeffrey Epstein's island for a few hours and then flew back, but he only went for a few hours, or he went for a day. Like you don't know how long he went for.
He didn't go for a week. He didn't go.
Has Amir broken up, or is that me?
We lost him, yeah.
Well, I've got some more questions for him, so hopefully he's back. Sorry.
Hello, testing. Huh?
Oh, sorry, you're back. Sorry, you broke off for a few seconds. Do continue.
I'm in shitty Middle Eastern internet. But anyway.
Yeah.
He went to Epstein Island. I don't think he stayed overnight. He had like a meeting with Epstein and he left and then he came back. So
he goes to Jeffrey Epstein's island. He allegedly maybe goes for a week. You don't think he stayed overnight, but you can't remember. Something happens in the island. Sorry, go ahead.
Literally, like, you know, my co-founder's traveling to the US. He has meetings with people. I don't question his itinerary. Like, oh, you spent how long in this place? How long in this place? But I do not. He did tell me back then that he went to this billionaire's island, which was Jeffrey Epstein. And he had a meeting with him. But after the meeting, he came back and he for some reason or other, he didn't want any association with Epstein. So I'm telling you that info. I didn't need to tell you that info.
No,
that is what
happened. Honesty. I appreciate honesty because I thought that you met in New York first. So I'm not. Sorry, do continue.
I'm just telling you for the sake of the record of his history, what happened. You know, I don't have any agenda or anything to hide. Everything is how it happened.
I understand that, and maybe you can put it down to possibly recklessness, or you know, you're maybe I don't know, you're young, and I think you mentioned previously that you were. I mean, your name's 420, so you're probably taking a bit of narcotics and maybe not aware of what's going on. I presume because
I mean, Silk Road was like a big reason for Bitcoin. It was like a very anti-authoritarian, subversive technology. It was amazing when it existed. It was like, oh, maybe we can use agorism, we can use free trade to break the deadlock governments have of fiat money and using it to fund war. Like literally, that was the time when Iraq-Afghanistan war happened, where 2 million people died in the Middle East.
Exactly.
It was like back then, everybody was like, "That is absolutely fucking crazy." Yet today, we're doing more war. So
I agree. But just coming back to it, and I agree with what you said there. But the issue is this: that you not being aware of, as you mentioned earlier, like your partner has a meeting with a billionaire, which is just mind-blowing for someone who's 21 years old. It's an opportunity of a lifetime. His partner goes to Epstein Island to meet Jeffrey Epstein. You don't know how long it was. You don't know what the conversations were. You don't know what your partner was up to while he was there. You don't know if your partner maybe had some kind of blackmail against him. Like, you're not aware of any of those things, but what you do know is your partner went to Epstein Island, but you're just unaware of the rest of it, is what you're telling us, right?
Yeah, he didn't say much. He was just like, oh no, Epstein's bad news. We should stay away from him. And that's it.
And he didn't ask, like, why is he bad news? Why is he so bad news that I shouldn't get like $1 billion from him or $1 million?
He says it was because of these pedo stuff. So he actually, I mean, in an organization, when you've got people that are working on tech and you've got a guy doing business, the guy in business is responsible for the relations of like who you partner and who you take money with and stuff like that. And also doing due diligence on people. So me as a tech guy, I didn't do due diligence on who we work with, and I'm not that smart, if I'm really honest. So that's why when I saw
actually, you're quite smart. You're into Bitcoin early. Apparently you're a hacker. But anyway,
I'm lacking in many areas.
Okay, but the thing, what you just said now is that Epstein, you said he's a pedo guy. How? And so I want to try and question that aspect of it, because obviously you mentioned that you read Wikipedia, you were aware of what was said on Wikipedia. Your partner still wanted to meet him. Your partner went to his private island, Jeffrey Epstein Island, to meet him. And then after the meeting in the island, he says he's a pedo guy. So what happened on the island that made your partner tell you that he's a pedo guy? So did your partner observe some kind of pedophilic behavior? Did he observe it? Did he view it?
I'm definitely wondering now, like now all this stuff happened, like things started going in my head. But at the time he was like, no, he's just bad news. Like, and he started talking about the stuff online. He goes, "Oh, he's got court cases. We don't need that kind of energy." So, you know, maybe I honestly wonder.
Okay, and
But, I said I've got this court case with him,
yeah,
and things between us did not end well, and there's a lot of beef between us. But you know, I'm very thankful that he had the foresight for that. So, you know, hats off to him, and also, you know, hats off to Gavin Andresen if what you're saying is true as well. That he was just straight up like, no, you know, that's you know the benefit of life experience, I guess. Like my co-founder, actually, he was also the same age as me, maybe a bit older, but he had like a background of, you know, parents that were working. I mean, I don't want to give too much of his life away, but, you know, parents that work in politics, and he also knew about business and banking and stuff like that. So, you know, he had some, you know, good insights there. I guess he knew what he was doing.
And then just another question, and then I don't know if Simon's got questions on this thread, and then we'll move on to the next item I wanted to speak about. But then it says, tonight or tomorrow should be fine. Sorry, I have been swamped. So did your friend also meet him in New York, or did he solely meeting in Epstein Island?
I mean, I don't want to say what did, but I think he just went to the island and met him. I don't think they met in New York. I think he was in New York, and he just kind of like went there, visited him, then came back, kind of thing. I don't know more specifics than that.
But the email seems to suggest that there was a meeting, because it says tonight or tomorrow should be fine. Sorry, I've been swamped. Your friend's in New York at the time. It seems like Epstein's confirming tonight or tomorrow. So it does seem like they possibly met.
Yeah.
But then that means he met more than once, right?
No, they met once. I'm sure of that.
So he didn't meet in New York.
No, I mean, okay, I'm not going to say they met on the island, but I think they met on the island, and they didn't meet in New York. That's my understanding of it.
Okay.
But we have to ask Donald himself what happened for his.
Well, I think it might be good if you can get Donald to have a conversation, because it seems like there's a lot of elaboration that needs to be. There needs to be a lot of illumination on this, because it does seem like a lot of things happen in that meeting. Maybe even things he saw in the island that made him claim that this guy is partaking in, as per what you said, pedo behavior. And so there is probably some kind of clarification. Did your friend see this? Did he view this? Did he observe this? Did he take part in this? These are genuine questions that I have about this.
I mean, yeah, but I don't know if I can get Donald, honestly. I mean, he's like has beef with me, so.
Okay, let's, Simon, have you got any questions on this thread? Because then I want to go to this other image.
Two more on this part. Like when someone's in New York and they said, "I'll see you tomorrow," what was it, tonight or tomorrow? Did it say, or tomorrow or the day after? Like, surely going from New York to Epstein Island is a big logistics thing. Would that imply that he was going to just arrange a plane for him or something? I mean, it's just weird. If you're in New York and you're saying, "I'll meet you maybe tomorrow or the day after," it implies that they're meeting in New York. What makes you think they met on the island?
I don't know. It's just like a very faint old memory 12 years ago. I also misremember things a lot. So it could be they met in New York. But as far as I remember it, he mentioned going to the island to meet Epstein, or he talked something about the island, but I'm not sure. Could be wrong.
Okay. And my final question before we move on, what actually happened to that business? Did it get dissolved? Is it still alive? Did it go bankrupt, or what happened to it?
Well, as I was saying about the exchanges and the bank accounts, our bank account got closed after the Bitcoin 2012 conference. And then so there are three co-founders, me and the other co-founder, we just decided to shut it down. So we just closed it and imploded. And
who was the other co-founder?
Patrick Straitman. So we just dissolved. Oh yeah, there's like the famous post. We just dissolved the company.
Okay, so it was like a UK company, a Polish company, a big group, and you, in 2012, you just went around dissolving everything.
We didn't even close the companies, I don't think. We just kind of, dissolved.
Is it still alive today? Is it still open today?
You mean the company or the activities?
Just the company.
Maybe. I don't know, honestly.
Okay, but were you an actual director of the company, or were you just...
I was the director of some of the companies.
Okay. So if we look up Amir Taaki on Companies House, you can see the company history.
Yeah. You'll see loads of companies from that period. So you'll be able to trace some more.
Okay. And just for the complete picture, like Amir, I know I'm not just bringing up stuff because this was very public at the time. You used to talk about drug usage at the time and stuff. Are you saying your memory of these things, kind of there was a lot of use of drug usage and stuff at the time? or is it just
Sorry, what do
it
you-
was a long time?
You mean because I don't remember?
Yeah, are you saying you don't remember because was it to do with drug usage, or it's just because it was ages ago, or is it because you don't really remember stuff?
Do you remember stuff from 12 years ago like that?
No, I got a bad memory as well. So
I don't need. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I'm just wondering what your explanation is, because I would just say, yeah, I don't remember everything from 12 years ago, and you're saying the same thing, yeah?
Yeah, pretty much. You're saying like what happened to, because like Company's House, you go on there, you create a company, and then you create another company. I literally would like just create companies like that, and then I'd just forget about them. And it was pretty much like that. We were like, oh, we need a company. All right, let's make a company. So it's like,
I mean, look,
like
that's fair enough. I can look. I think many of us, when it comes to 12 years ago, 13 years ago, actually it's nearly 14 years ago, we're not going to know the details. You may overarchingly try and remember things vaguely. It's only when you reread things it may refresh your memory. So I understand that could be the case. Is there any more questions you got on this, Simon? Because if not, I've got the next.
Let's go to the next thread.
Okay, so obviously you're an early Bitcoin guy. You know that your friend is allegedly on Epstein Island, your co-founder. You post this in a message board, I believe, and I'll leave it to the
Bitcoin
audience.
Talk forum,
This is
where everyone was communicating then.
Sorry?
This is the Bitcoin Talk forum, is that correct, Amir?
Yeah, it was a really stupid joke, like really
Let me
bad
read it,
taste.
and then
yeah, go for it.
So there's two 16-year-olds together, 50 Bitcoin an hour. Right now, 50 Bitcoin an hour. What's that, like 5 million?
To be honest.
Is that
It was
5
just
million?
kind of like
I know.
a scam kind of thing.
Well,
But-
what do you say it's a scam?
What's the date of the post?
January 31st, 2011. What did you say it's a scam?
Yeah, just like see who responds. Like maybe somebody can send some Bitcoin.
you were scamming people?
It's like not even. It wasn't fully a scam. It was just like, not even barely any thought put into it. Just a kind of like troll joke. And it is. I was like young and stupid. Now I'm like, oh, that's
Wait,
kind of like.
1 second. There's something. Okay, so there's something that's a scam, and then there's something about trolling, and then there's something where it's legitimately happening. So you said all three. Well, you said the first 2 points. Now, a scam would mean that essentially what you've done is you claim that you're selling these 16-year-olds for prostitution, and then in reality there is no 16-year-old girls that you're basically you're not being a pimp to those 16-year-old girls, and you're just you're providing the Bitcoin wallet and then stealing someone's money. So that's one option. The other option is there are 16-year-old girls and boys, apparently, so it looks like I can see a boy there as well. And the third one is, oh, it was a joke and I just posted it. So those are 3 options. You said the first one and you said the last one. Which one is it?
It's a mix of both.
How can it be a mix?
I mean, have you ever posted stupid shit on the internet?
I've never posted something which would mean me prostituting a woman and then either using that to steal someone's money and then saying it's a joke as well. It's either you're stealing someone's money or it's a joke or you're prostituting, but it can't be a combination of all 3. It makes no sense.
Okay, have you ever posted anything on the internet that you didn't really think about? And look, I could have deleted this years ago when I saw it could be an issue, but I chose to leave it. Why? Because I don't need to delete anything from the internet. I chose to leave this up because I was like, okay, like people can see it, and it's like blatantly, obviously, in my opinion, quite obvious. Just like it's not like a serious post.
How many people sent you money?
None.
Is the wallet address on the post? Was there a wallet address connected to it, or?
No, it says DM me. But what I could do, maybe, is we could get access to that account. You can check the DMs. And if you want to do that, you want to go to Thamos or whoever, I will give permission for you to have access to that account. As long as you're not doing any wrong.
Just for clarity, you don't have access to this account anymore.
No, but I'm sure you could get it from Thamos, so you can get access to DMs.
What's Thamos?
If you really want to see, like, oh, did I get any money? So first of all, there's no, I don't know if anybody messaged or anything. But if you check my posting history from that time, you can see I'm posting loads of shit.
Why don't you have access to the account anymore?
Because I went to a war in Syria for like 2 years.
Well, we're going to cover that in a second, but
do you have access?
Just to be clear, so the government took away your access to this account?
No, I lose access to all my shit on the internet. I don't.
You can't remember your passwords and you don't have access to the email.
Pretty much, I don't have access to any of my stuff from 5 years ago.
The email, is it the email you can't access?
Don't know. I could access it if I wanted to. I could message.
You can get access because I can log into the Bitcoin Talk forum and I've got all my account records.
I haven't been interested to log into it. Like, does anybody use it anymore? Is it relevant?
No, I was just asking, you said you lost access. Does that mean you no longer have access to the email, so you can't reset your password?
I could get access if I wanted to. Okay. I can message Themos. But yes, I lost the email. I forgot the password, and then also I lost interest in Bitcoin Talk, and I just haven't been on there for many years. I mean, I have.
Just for the record, Themos is the administrator of Bitcoin Talk Forum. But you could, if you needed to, if there was a subpoena and the court asked you to do it, you could get access to this account. He's saying, or you don't think you can?
Maybe if Themos gave me access.
No, if you just by you when you signed up for an account, you would have connected an email. Do you still?
No, not like that. But
you don't have the email. You don't have access to the email anymore.
I mean, I don't remember which email it is, but I think it might be the same email that's used in the Epstein thing, which is genjix@riseup.net. And I don't
have access to that email anymore.
No, I lost it when I went to Syria.
How do you lose access to an email?
When you go to a war zone, you're like, I didn't go on the computer for 3 months.
Sorry, it's got a username. It's got a username and a password, right? So did you lose the password to your email and you can't reset the password, or?
I don't know. It's so long. Like, I don't know. Do you have emails from like 10, 20 years ago still? Maybe you do. Fair play. People
so for example, I don't have access. I used to own a domain from like 20 years ago, and I don't have that domain anymore, so I can no longer log into that email because it was hosted on a particular domain. What is this email hosted with?
RiseUp.
And you can't access that anymore.
I mean, maybe if I messaged the RiseUp people and I explained like some dramatic story. I mean, I don't think they give people access to emails even if you lose it as a policy, but maybe
there's no like reset password button on a cloud hosted environment or anything.
I don't know. I've lost the email. I don't even use it anymore.
All right, cool.
But,
then okay, did anyone from your memory, did anyone respond to this and DM you?
Maybe one guy did respond, but then I don't think anything happened, if I remember correctly.
And did you send him a Bitcoin wallet address?
I don't think I did.
Did you ever receive any money for any of this?
No.
Okay. And your explanation is that like when someone contacted you in order to place an order, what did you reply? Do you remember?
I think I was just busy and I just kind of didn't really bother. And if you check, if you look at my account around that time, you can see I'm like selling things, I'm like offering services. So I'm doing all these like hustles to get Bitcoin. And this isn't really one of those hustles, but it was like, oh, I can be the first pimp in Bitcoin. I know it's not good. It's like not good fame to want. Now I'm like, oh. But back then I thought.
Did you actually have any girls or boys that would be willing to?
You've seen me from that era. Like I can literally send a video. Maybe I'll send a video in the chat. You can see what I'm like. I'm literally a kissless virgin. Like.
But you said you wanted to be the first pimp in Bitcoin.
I know it's so stupid. Now I think about it. I'm like, oh, so cringe. But okay.
But did you actually have any girls and boys that would be willing to be sold?
Well.
So you had no one in the background that would be willing to sell themselves?
No.
So it was just you and a post. And then if someone DM'd you, did you ever give them a wallet address so that they could send you money? But
I don't think so. I did. I didn't receive any money, that's for sure.
So look, let me be clear on this. I think your explanation on this one doesn't make sense. And I'll explain to you why. And I'll explain to you why, and I do want to hear your thoughts. So if you look, sorry,
because it's so well written.
Yeah, actually, yeah, because it is so well written. Because it literally says, if you look at the way you've broken it down, either if you're shitposting and someone's just chatting nonsense, there won't be a correlation in what they say. And what I mean by that is, in one post, I might be like, oh, you can have one boy, you can have two boys, you can have three boys, you can have one woman, two women, three men. There won't be this correlation. What I'm seeing on this post is there is correlation. It's quite clear that you had two girls and one boy, and you've done a combination of different modes.
Okay, so one thing that doesn't make sense is why is one person 20 Bitcoin and two people is 50? Surely it'd be less, right? So there's like a big inconsistency. But anyway,
No, it's not.
you're saying about how well,
how is that?
Okay.
That makes sense. You pay more for two.
Two for what? Two is
No,
less.
no,
Two
what do
is
you mean?
usually priced less than
No, what do you
one
mean?
times two. Anyway, don't worry
No,
about
that makes no.
But if you look, what I'm saying is you're going like,
Amir, you're not making
oh,
sense.
sorry.
Can I just explain to you why that's not wrong? So first of all, according to the combinations, you got 2 girls and 1 boy, and you've done different combinations, which shows that that's the combinations you've based it on. The second thing is you have done the opposite of what you're saying. When there's 1 girl or 1 boy, you're charging 20 Bitcoins. When there's 2, either a girl and a boy, or 2 girls, then you're charging 50 Bitcoin. That makes sense. You pay more for more people.
No, yeah, but what I'm saying is, you see, 2 of the ones would be 40. I can't believe we're having this combo. All right.
Yeah, but again,
then
I presume
with the combo, it would be 25 each.
I
The
understand
maths
what you're
doesn't
saying,
even
but
work
again,
out.
from my
Maths is
understanding,
like, but look, just
well,
look
once
at, if
again,
you don't
actually,
believe,
maybe you got to pay more for the 3.
by the way,
Like,
I just want to talk also about the shit posting thing.
I
You're
disagree.
talking about shit posting
No, but
today.
Amir,
People write like in this style. If you look at my posts then, you will see what shit posting style is like. And shit posting
I
style
don't need
back
to look
then.
at. Look, let me respond to
Reddit,
this. Let me respond to this. I
where
don't need to
you
look at your
write-
other posts. I could just look at what you've tweeted here,
Yeah.
and if you could provide
No, but I'm
evidence for
saying-
other things, it's fine. But you just need,
It's not, first of all, it's not a shit post. It's a troll, which is different. But also, you're saying, oh, it can't be a troll because it's not in the shit post style. But anyway, I'm saying all of my posts, if you look in this time, are in this style because that's how we used to write back then on the forums, was in Reddit style. Today is different. When people shit post, they have, like all lower caps, tons of slang. So, I'm saying it's like there was literally no thought. It was like you can see there's a consistent posting history in that time, posting random bullshit. And I was like, oh yeah, this would be funny. Oh yeah, wonder if something will happen. Maybe get some Bitcoin. Post it. Never think about it ever again for several years.
okay,
Maybe someone messaged it. But I was doing other shit. And I didn't even care that much.
That's two very
let me
different
respond to
things.
that. So the problem you've got is that your initial claim was you were trolling, and you never had any thought, and you wrote it down. Now, when you look at this, there is actual thought that's gone into it. It's quite clearly that there's 2 girls and 1 boy. It makes sense in the sense of 1 is less, 2 you charge more for. The third point of it is you quite clearly stated out what the law in the UK is. You talked about the specifics like pay up front, anything goes, can role play, and then PM or post here. So this notion or this idea that you didn't think this through makes no sense whatsoever. And so now you can say, I thought it through, but it was a scam. I thought it through, but I thought it's even more hilarious if it, I don't know, whatever it is. Or the other one is, yeah, I didn't have those people. But to make it look like this post doesn't make sense, or it's just random, it's clearly not the case. Because when I look at it, there's a combination on the first one of 2 girls. On the second one is 1 boy and 1 girl. The third one is just 1 girl. And then the fourth one is just 1 boy, which when you mix and match, that makes sense. Now, if you'd said something like, I don't know, 3 boys and 1 girl, and then another one you said 1 and 2, and there was a contradiction, then that would make sense.
I mean, man, you can analyze this as much as you want. I'm just telling you what is the thing.
So,
I said.
Amir, the bit that doesn't quite make sense to me, that there's a real difference between I was joking and then the next sentence you said, I was just trying to see if I could get some Bitcoin. Because if you're trying to get some Bitcoin, that implies that you're either going to steal someone's Bitcoin and not deliver the goods, or you had the goods, but you wouldn't have got any Bitcoin. Either you were trying to take someone's Bitcoin or you were trying to engage in the service.
It was a joke. What can I say?
Yeah, but you just said it's a joke, and I was just trying to see if I could get some Bitcoin. Do you see what
I
I'm
honestly
saying?
didn't really think it through.
No, you just said that now. I'm just saying you just said that now.
Said what?
You just said it was a joke. I just wanted to see if I could get some Bitcoin.
Uh-huh. I mean, what can I say? Just look at the similar posts from that period and see if it fits the general pattern. I'm not saying, I mean, you can believe what you want to believe, but anybody else who's watching, they can make their own judgment. And this is what I'm saying. It wasn't some like big business plan. It's like a very poor taste post made quite young and very stupid.
For the record, have you ever exchanged a girl or a boy for Bitcoin?
No. But I did think it would be like edgy to be the first pimp.
So you wanted to exchange, but you didn't do it. You wanted to do it.
I just wanted to have the post, so it'd be like, oh, I did that. But now I'm like, yeah, it's kind of was.
So you were trying to just build a brand of being a pimp.
No, honestly, you're thinking about it more than I thought about it. It's literally just a post that I made randomly.
But you can see why this is relevant, right? First of all, you put this tweet out about these 16-year-old girls and boys that you're pimping out, either as a joke or not, or as a way of scamming someone, whichever explanation you want to go with on that. And then your friend, just a few months later, is on Epstein's island and talks about pedo behavior.
what can I say?
Okay. Any more questions on Simon? Because then I wanted to bring it onto the other thing, and then you can answer that question that you had previously.
No, I reckon let's go to, I think there's a final thread, and then I'd be curious about asking Amir's opinion on some of the people he was talking about earlier.
Yeah. The other point, I don't know which thread you're referring to, because...
Oh, it just as in the ISIS stuff.
Oh, yeah, okay. So the other thing I wanted to speak to you about, Amir, and I don't know how to take these things off here, but the other thing I wanted you to...
I was just going to say, this post, I could have deleted it like years ago when people brought it up for the first time, but I chose not to delete it.
You claim that you didn't have access, right?
I mean, I can get access. I know the guy that runs the forum. But I thought it was better to leave it because I don't want to...
good for you to get access, because there's serious question marks about whether you did get paid or not. So if you can get access, that would be good. Maybe it may elucidate and illuminate us on whether it was just for bans and there was nothing in it, and you were just doing it as... And you weren't, I mean, you were young, but you weren't like crazy young. You're like 23 years old. Yeah, anyway, so I wouldn't go...
It is stupid. And I'm like...
Okay, like it being stupid is fine. Like everyone does stupid things, and I don't think you were that young. But that being said, look, everyone does stupid things. That's not the issue. The issue is when you look at the depth and breadth of what's being said, and then you look at your explanation, which doesn't fully make sense. Like at the one hand, you're saying you're trying to make Bitcoin. On the other hand, you're saying you're trying to scam people. On the other hand, you're saying there was no women. Then you're saying it's just for trolls. Some of that just like is a bit of a contradictory. But anyway, let's just move on to the next bit. So if you do get the access, maybe that'll clarify, and maybe it is just that you're under pressure trying to explain something on the spot. Now the other question about is, sorry,
relax. Like honestly, I'm giving you the info. You can believe it or not believe it.
Well, yeah, we appreciate you coming on for sure. The other question I've got for you is that you mentioned you went to Syria for 2 years. Do you want to explain what made you go to Syria and who you were fighting with and against?
I was in Syria 3.5 years.
Okay. What year?
2015 and 2016.
Okay.
And then also 2019.
Okay.
So just for context, in 2011, the same year that these posts happened, that's when we had Arab Spring, and then the dirty Syrian war broke out. There were multiple factions. There was an ISIS invasion, which I believe and most people believe were connected to Mossad, CIA, Western operations.
This is well documented. It's like not even I believe. It was literally like, you look at the origin story of ISIS. There was like clearly a huge US role that was played in that. And we know the CIA loves these like Islamist groups. So
yeah, I completely agree with that. So the Islamist group was manufactured as a Western construct in order to destabilize. And so what you're saying is that, okay, the dirty war started 2011. And then in 2015, 4 years after it started, are you Syrian, by the way?
I presume it's...
I'm not Kurdish. I'm not Syrian.
Oh.
My dad is Persian and my mum is English. So it's not related at all to ethnicity. It's not related to religion. It's not even related to ISIS. It's purely related to ideology.
Okay, so what was it about in 2015? What was it that made you take the decision? And I'm assuming you were in UK in 2015, is that correct?
I was actually in Spain, in Catalonia.
Okay, so you were in Spain, and what made you take that decision to go to Syria and fight ISIS?
So, the Kurds are like, they're a very old ethnic group in the Middle East, and these like nation states that exist in the Middle East, such as Turkey, are Western constructs which have completely unnatural borders. And the Middle East is like, it's a very diverse place. It's like with all these different groups living side by side. And Turkey as a state had this policy of like assimilation and erasing local identity, and in particular against the Kurds. And they actually nearly succeeded in doing that in the 70s and the 80s, until like the PKK started to resist against Turkey. What happened was then there was like the PKK actually started off as this nationalistic Stalinist group, and Turkey erupted into this civil war. And it was a brutal civil war that spiraled into this like incredible amount of violence where tens of thousands of people on both sides were killed. And eventually the leader of the PKK, Öcalan, he got captured and he got taken to jail. And when he was in jail, he started to ask a question, which was, the Middle East is the birthplace of human civilization. It's the origin of many of the world's major religions and philosophies. Why is it that in the last 100 years or so, there's been this problem in the Middle East of ethnic cleansing, genocide, religious fundamentalism? And he kind of came to this conclusion that actually the nation state is, it's a Western political model. Like nation states in Europe actually came after a really long extended period of erasure of local community. So I found the political proposal of the YPG, of Rojava, a very exciting prospect to resolve some of the fundamental contradictions in the Middle East. Actually, what happened was, I like to read a lot of Wikipedia, and I was reading about Pechak, which is a rebel group in Iran, and it actually said that 15,000 feminist fighters. PKK was a Stalinist organization. But then when I actually started to read their materials, their actual things that they write, it was talking about a lot of interesting ideas like decentralized economics, stuff like that. I had already been following the Syrian civil war for more than a year. The Syrian civil war is probably the best documented war in human history. There used to be this subreddit called Syrian Civil War, and it had so many factions on there. It had ISIS people, it had Assad people, it had Hezbollah, it had like Americans, it had YPG, it had all of the, and everybody was like discussing. And so I was already reading about that. But when I started reading more about the PKK, and I found out there was this region in North Syria, I became very interested in their ambitious political projects and trying to learn more about it. But there wasn't any info on the internet at that time. And that was when ISIS attacked Kobani, and it looks like Kobani was about to fall. And so I felt, as a political revolutionary, that if I didn't go and help out with that, if I didn't go in that hour of need and offer what I can, I would be inauthentic. I would not be living according to my beliefs or ideology. And it wasn't a decision I made. It was kind of like I felt I had to do this, and even though I didn't want to do it, I was like, I'm probably going to die. I was like certain I was going to die. I felt pulled by that kind of sense of destiny, and it was kind of like just watching yourself go into that. It's like being disembodied. So I went there, and I also became fluent in Kurdish, and I was on the front line for 3.5 months. I later left. I started working on economic projects later on, and I started working more on technical projects. So it was purely ideological because I think the Middle East have a lot of potential, but I think the Middle East needs to have some change. There needs to be something. There needs to be like a fundamental kind of reform. And I think, what's that? No, it's my friend's baby boy. I have to. So anyway, I think the Middle East can do something great, but there are fundamental.
Would you frame it as ideological reasons you like the ideology behind the Kurds? Would you agree with this statement that the Kurdistan project, kind of like a people without a home, the Western interests and the CIA ended up weaponizing and utilizing, and they ended up guarding all the oil in Syria for the CIA?
And just to answer that question,
I don't think US has that much interest in. I think yes, they kind of see Kurds as leverage that they can use, but in the end of the day, in this region now, pragmatism rules, and Al-Shara, Julani, and Turkey and Saudi, those are the guys that are holding the cards, basically.
Sure, but back then, right, the Kurds in general were serving a Western interest for the CIA.
The Kurds have their own, so it's important to understand, the Kurds have their own interests, they have their own ideology, and also the Kurdish movement was actually founded by Kurds that were fighting with the PLO, the Palestinians in Bekaa Valley. And later on, they were actually funded by Assad.
Amir, can I just clarify the point? So I think I don't disagree that the YPG or later the SDF were in conflict with ISIS, and there's no doubt that ISIS was funded, financed, and supported by the United States of America, Israel, and the Turks. No one disagrees with that. I think what the question is there's quite clear evidence that the SDF and the YPG, even though they may have their own internal belief system and views as per what made you enticed and you really believed in it to the extent that you put your life on the line. But that being said, despite them having their own viewpoint, there is quite clear, ample evidence, unequivocal, that the United States of America, through the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, funded and finance supported the YPG and the SDF. Now, I guess the question I believe Simon is asking you is, A, were you aware of that? And B, do you agree with that? Sorry.
The CIA supports Islamists.
No,
the Defense
the Pentagon. I said the Defense Department, yeah. I was clear.
Yeah. But just, so we're clear on that. The US actually has an internal, and it's actually the CIA that wins out most of the time. I think the Defense Department is subordinate to the CIA in terms of Middle East. But I've seen CIA in Rojava. They drive around in blacked out cars. In fact, I have a funny story where one of my good friends in the YPG back in 2015, he was actually a defector from the UK Army from a base in Cyprus. He'd come, and he was such a funny guy. He was taking all these selfies, going, I look so fucking cool in this. He was like, I'm gonna bang loads of chicks. After I get back, that's what he was saying. But then what happened one day is these blacked out vehicles came. Oh yeah, he got on the Daily Mail. That was what happened. The Daily Mail was like, oh, a UK soldier defected, and they had his photos from Facebook on there. And then literally what happened, pretty much instantly, these blacked out vehicles came up, and we were a unit of 5-6 soldiers. I was the only non-professional soldier in that group. But then these guys came out in suits, and they were like, he has to come with us. And we were like, no, he's with us, he's not leaving. But they were like, no, he has to come with us. And there was a standoff for a while. And the Kurds were like, he has to go with them. And then he was forced to leave. We never saw him ever again. So I wonder what happened to him. But that's my funny CIA story that I have. But I did see him a few times zooming about on the way, but we never interact with them.
But Amir, just coming back to the point, I think what I mentioned, you accept, right, that the YPG, the SDF, were financed, funded, and supported by the DoD, which is the Department of Defense of the United States of America.
I mean, kinda. It's not complete. I mean, the PKK is not funded by the US. They actually get a lot of funding from their European networks, and they do a lot of dodgy stuff as well.
Well, there's a reason why. Look, let's be clear. There's a reason why you've not been arrested when you went back to the United States of United Kingdom, and the reason is because you were with a US.
I had a terrorism investigation for 1 year. I was under house arrest.
And then what happened after that?
They dropped the charges.
Exactly. What happened to Shamima Begum?
I mean, she literally joined ISIS. I think she should. She should probably be. I don't know about execution.
Well, she should be punished for sure. I have no disagreement with that whatsoever. I disagree with ISIS completely, vehemently. And I'm against the rebellion in Syria.
Honestly, I thought when I go back to the UK, if anything, because I knew, so this is actually true. I think you can look this up. 3% of returning ISIS people were charged in the UK. Right. 25% of returning YPG fighters were charged. So actually more YPG were charged than actual ISIS people.
How many were actually punished though? I'm not talking about charged, because you can be charged and it's because of stupidity, it's a lack of evidence, you're not being to trial. How many?
I don't think people should be charged. I don't think anything we did is criminal. I think in fact it's virtuous. I actually expected when I came back that they would give me a medal. Like if anything, I was like, I thought the police would pat me on the back and be like, "Well done." Actually, they didn't. They're like, "Oh, you're under arrest."
So I understand where you're coming. So I understand where you're coming from, because we have people who join the IDF and they aren't charged. We have people who join ISIS, and although they are charged, but joining ISIS is problematic. I think with your one, it's kind of more of a gray area. And what I mean by that is, even though in your mind,
gray area. It's completely no. It's completely virtuous. I think their fight.
I don't think it's virtuous to be working with the DoD. I don't think it's virtuous to be working with the DoD. So I'm not saying it's black or white. I'm not saying it's bad as well. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying this element.
You want to know something?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, listen, I'll tell you something that's really important to know. A few months ago, I actually had a friend who's high up in the YPG tell me that the US came to them and said, if you go to Iran and fight, and ally with Israel, we will give you everything you want. But the YPG refused because they didn't want to be like a proxy of the US. And then recently, this stuff happened where the US dropped them like a stone and basically allied with Syria. And I heard this video from Trump, and you can find a video where he goes, "We gave the Kurds everything. We gave them oil, we gave them money, we gave them guns. But they're not fighting for us. They're fighting for themselves." That's what he said. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, holy shit. That's what happened. And I actually think maybe they should have been more pragmatic. Maybe they should have taken that deal, because now what's happened is they were just eliminated. What can you do if you're eliminated? Nothing. So I understand though, I have Arab friends I've been speaking with about this, and they were going like, the Kurds went wrong by being America's bitch.
True.
Now, if you actually look, if you go on the internet and you search social ecology, Amir Taaki, there's actually an article which was cancellation by the UK anarchist left against me, where they're saying Amir Taaki is a fascist infiltrator inside of the Rojava movement. Why? Because my Alexander Dugin, who his daughter was assassinated, and I was actually friends with his daughter. And the reason why I was friends with Dugin is because I actually went to meet Dugin to try and negotiate an alliance between the Kurds and Russia. And I was actually one of the people inside of that Rojava movement that was saying we should be closer more with Russia and Syria rather than the US. But Russia, the Kurds did have an alliance with Russia in Afrin, and Russia backstabbed them. And the thing is, you have to understand is that Russia has a very different style of foreign policy to the US. The Russia is like a big mafia boss, where it's like you're loyal to me, or else. Whereas the US is like purely transactional. As soon as someone offers a better, higher value, they will flip. And both are really shitty situations to be in. But I was more inside of that. But
look, I don't want to demonize you about this, because I understand it doesn't come across like that, because I can see from your perspective that you've done things because of honorable reasons based on your own mind. And I understand the complexities of war, that in the end, when you're in that situation, you're having to make certain choices. And unfortunately, the choice the Kurds made was to align with the United States of America. And as you said quite rightly, they betrayed them when the chance came. And this has always been the case with the issue with the Kurds and the Kurd separatist movement, where they are actually used as men for hire. Now, it's nice to hear that your friend said otherwise, but there are obviously a number of instances where Kurds have gone in at the behest of the United States of America.
I think they had a failure of leadership, and they probably didn't play the game so well, because I'm like now talking with some of my Arab friends, and they say like, al-Shara, he's very pragmatic and he's very charismatic when he talks and sophisticated. I don't know anything much about the guy, but I have seen the CIA video where where I don't know if you've seen the CIA video, the guy who's talking about his meeting with al-Shara, and it's like an American. This is before al-Shara became public, and saying, he's like charismatic, and that's when they realized he was their guy, that kind of stuff. And I think like in the Middle East, it's all like right now, everything's just playing out. It's just purely pragmatism. It's purely like, who can make deals with who. And a lot of the rhetoric that we hear, like for example, Turkey saying they're anti-Israel, it's just purely for domestic consumption. But like everybody's like making alliances with Israel and shit.
Yeah.
So that's like the reality of like the stuff we live in now. Like,
yeah, I agree with you in terms of them making an alliance with Israel and everything you're saying on that. Simon, have you got any questions on this?
Yeah, just want to, for complete clarity, have you ever had interactions with any intelligence agencies when you went to Syria? Was it on the behalf of anything else other than you supporting for ideological reasons?
Nothing to do with Syria, but I did have an approach once by intelligence, but this was in 2011, where at the border, they detained me, and they actually tried to recruit me, and I was like a bit shy. So I didn't want anything to do with them. I was actually kind of like, grossed out by it. But I kind of was polite and just kind of mumbled like, and they gave me their business card, but then I kind of chucked away the business card after that. So that was
what do you think they tried to recruit you for?
So they said, we're interested in people like you. And I was like, what kind of people is that? And they said, people that's involved with Anonymous, that kind of stuff. They meant like, hacker things.
In the hacker community, or would you say in the Bitcoin community specifically?
They didn't mention Bitcoin. They mentioned Anonymous, so maybe hacking and stuff like that. I don't know. And also Bitcoin wasn't that big then. So
in 2011, on a border, you were approached and
in the UK.
MI6?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I don't know if it's MI6
was interested in recruit. Sorry?
I don't know if it's MI6 per se. I don't know the layout.
Potential.
They were like,
they're all the same. Mossad, MI6, CIA. They seem to be a mafia. But they did try to recruit you because of your profile as a hacker. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And for the record, are you going to hack Suleiman or myself? And
don't do it, Amir. Don't do it. Don't benefit the Zayos.
I'm not that kind of hacker, to be honest. I'm actually quite bad with computers. My main thing is algorithms and math and code. and building things.
Yeah, I know you may not like this line of questioning, but Solomon and myself have been on the anti-Zionism fight. So if you end up hacking us, like, it's harmful for the cause.
Maybe someone will hack you, and then you'll be like, "Must be Amir." Like, I don't know. But
Yeah,
I'm
must
not
be Amir.
honestly.
We're gonna
I'm
turn.
not even that motivated to hack people.
So
I was
what's the question you got, Simon, about you had some specific questions about Bitcoin, and then we can wrap up.
Yeah, I just want to ask you your opinion on two people. So, firstly, do you have any opinion on Gavin Andreessen, whether he was ever turned by the CIA? Satoshi left the project when he joined the CIA. He vouched that Dr. Craig Wright was Satoshi Nakamoto. You said in your disputes with him, he tried to make a corporate shell around Bitcoin development ideologically. What's your perspective on Gavin Andreessen?
Okay, so about the Craig Wright thing, that was like so convenient for Gavin Andreessen that he was like, "Oh, this guy can be Satoshi, and he can vouch for me as the head of Bitcoin." So I'm not sure he even believed he was Satoshi. I think it was just like so convenient for him that he could believe. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. And yeah, so what were you saying?
Do you ever think whether he was ever turned by intelligence agencies?
Look, I don't know, but he was very naive about politics, and so he was like part of this cohort of people that was like, I don't know if you know Charlie Shrem.
Yeah.
So Charlie Shrem, he made BitInstant, and he was also part of that group, the Bitcoin Foundation people, and he was like, "Oh, you know, the guys in the government, they're good guys like us." And he actually went to the regulators and he opened his books up, and he was like, he did it as a show of good faith. And he was like, "Oh, you know, they see that, you know, I'm like them and we're like each other and we just want to make the world a better place." And instead what they did was they fucked him. They like used what he showed them to create a case against him, and he went to jail because of it. There's like ultimate naivety. And, you know, he obviously changed his mind later. But then also Gavin Andreessen, he was like, "Oh, we need to go and educate the regulators about Bitcoin to show them how it works, to get them on our side." And so that's why he went to the CIA. And when he made that post, everybody was like, "Oh, fuck, what is he doing?" It was kind of like that. It was like, there's no clue. He's like cluing up the enemy, basically. And it was just so stupid.
In your opinion, do you reckon he ever worked or was an asset of the CIA at any point?
Honestly, I don't want to speculate about it. But I can tell you who was an asset.
Yeah, so let's talk about Peter Todd.
So Peter Todd was, I mean, I don't know if he was back then. I mean, he's just become, but he was always, I mean, anyway.
But yeah, ideologically, he's put a lot of posts out there that suggest he's
now he's saying a lot of very hateful things against the Russians and stuff like that.
And but anyway, nuclear. He thought that after October the 7th, they should drop a nuclear bomb on Palestine.
I'm not going to talk about him now, but I will talk about what he did, which is more important, because so he was an absolute nobody, and there was this Bitcoin Foundation. And Gavin Andreessen put himself as the head of Bitcoin Foundation as its chief scientist. And then, you know, we opened this other side, we drew a line and we made another front to oppose the Bitcoin Foundation and oppose their corporate takeover of Bitcoin, which later this opposition that we started became Bitcoin maximalism. Like after I went to Syria, there was a power vacuum. Other people like Peter Todd and the Blockstream guys occupied that. They did a coup against Bitcoin Foundation. They took over Cypherpunk, etc. But anyway, at the time, we opened the second front, the opposition. We had the Dark Wallet project. And Peter Todd was like an absolute nobody who, you know, back then I was on top. So I like lifted him up out of obscurity and I put him as the chief scientist of Dark Wallet. And that was like directly a pun against Gavin Andreessen being the chief scientist of Bitcoin. And you can actually see that moniker is used in the BBC article about Dark Wallet, where it's actually about Dark Wallet being used by ISIS, to fund ISIS. And you can see him in that documentary. And also there's another one about Spain. I think Cyber Squad in Spain or something. But anyway, it's BBC Click. But anyway, Peter Todd was our chief scientist of our project. In fact, he was living with me and he was my friend and we were hanging out all the time together. Can you imagine that? Like somebody you know,
where was this?
And you make it. Huh?
Where were you living with Peter Todd?
2013. Spain, London. other places. He'd come stay with me. He's my friend. I'd hang out with him. We'd talk together about stuff, you know? Anyway, years later, his emails get leaked online. Somebody hacks his emails and leaked them online. The entire archive of his emails is on the internet. I have a copy of it. You can find it on Web Archive easily. In the emails, it shows that he is collaborating with a self-identified US intelligence agent. The guy says, I work for US intelligence, to stop Dark Wallet, to stop our team getting access to funding. And we weren't like a corporate startup. We were, you know, as the Epstein email says, open source radicals. We were fucking broke. We had no money. We literally like working on it because we believed in it. We were like literally had to live in squats because we had no money, because we're trying to fight for this thing, for Bitcoin, for freedom, etc. It was very difficult. It was a very difficult situation. And we're idealistic. We're trying to improve. We're trying to do something good. And Peter Todd is my friend. He's actually secretly communicating with an intelligence agent to try and cuck us our funding. And you know, this is what happened. See what happened exactly. You can find the thread on Bitcoin Talk. It was the CoinJoin Bounty Fund, where they said there was a post and it said, I think it was made by Gregory Maxwell. And Gregory Maxwell hates me. And I always assumed it was Gregory Maxwell that did this. But anyway, in the post, it says, this is a Bitcoin address. And this is a bounty to make the first implementation of CoinJoin. The first team in Bitcoin to make a CoinJoin wallet will get this money. And it says like, it literally says it like they will get sent all of the money. And so our team, we made it and we made the first coin, and I have the video of it. I can actually send the video. We actually made the first CoinJoin wallet, and you can see I post it in the thread. And then what happens is they change the rules. They edit the text in the OP to say, as the people see, as the people that control the fund see fit to pay out to the so this is the video. I'm just posting it here. That's the video of that wallet. So they changed the rules retroactively. And then in your Peter Todd's emails, what you can see happening is with this guy, John Dillon creates a Bitcoin address, and Peter Todd sends the money to John Dillon's Bitcoin address so that John Dillon can send it back to another address, which is the new address they put as the bounty fund. So John Dillon can claim that he donated the majority of money to that CoinJoin fund, and that he objects to my team, Amir, Taaki, and his team from receiving the money. So they used that as an excuse to stop us receiving the bounty that we, by the rules they set, should be able to claim. And I always assumed it was Gregory Maxwell, because the three people controlling the fund was Gregory Maxwell, Peter Willett, and Peter Todd. And I assumed that Gregory Maxwell, who fucking hates me, was the guy doing it. But no, it was my friend Peter Todd who was doing that. So crazy. And then even later, we actually made the dark wallet, which was an actual functioning wallet. It released alpha that did have also the CoinJoin, but like as a proper wallet. The first one was like more a prototype, and they were like, oh no, they're not allowed to get the money. Blah. So we made a proper product. We shipped that as well. And they still gave us zero from this fund. They gave other people money, but they never gave us a single penny from that fund. It was Peter Todd, who was meant to be my friend, who was meant to be our chief scientist, who was working with this guy. You can see it in his emails. The strange thing for me is all of this is known. And actually, I was telling people about this for years in Bitcoin. And I was like, it's fucking crazy. And people are like, oh, you know, conspiracy theory. And I was like, no, you can see the emails yourself. Here's the archive. Here's the info. And people wouldn't even bother to look. But then what happened was there was that HBO documentary about Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask today. Yeah. So they used that in order to try and say that Peter Todd was Satoshi.
Yeah, I told them about that in the documentary. I said, oh, look, he's a fucking agent. I don't know why. Maybe they go, what do you think of Peter Todd or something? And I said, oh, he's a fucking agent. Look, here's all the evidence. They used that then to go, he must be Satoshi. So I literally, I was literally the reason why they said Peter Todd is Satoshi. But it was like, I don't know how they derived that. I think they just probably wanted to. Yeah,
it's so retarded. But just for the record, from your perspective, is Peter Todd Satoshi?
No, I think actually probably Paul LaRue's Satoshi. And if not Paul LaRue, then Dorian Nakamoto. But Paul LaRue's probably... I mean, I don't know. You probably know as good as I do, or better than I do. I like Paul LaRue.
Did you ever interact with Satoshi direct?
I did, yeah. You can see on the forums we're messaging. I was actually the one who started the WikiLeaks thing the money being sent to WikiLeaks. And then Satoshi freaked out about that. But the thing I was saying about Peter Todd is then after that documentary came out, then people were like to me, they were like, whoa, oh, Peter Todd's an agent? I was like, bro, I've been fucking telling you for years. There's not just one person, many people. I was like, somehow so-called libertarian anarchist type people in Bitcoin, they need like an authority, which in this case is HBO. They can't like see the evidence, and they need an authority to tell them what's true and not true. So that was kind of disappointing. But then the even crazy thing is the HBO documentary has basically like made the evidence that I presented historical fact, which it is fact. You can see the archive, and Peter Todd even admits it. He like doesn't even deny it when you ask him. But like, and actually, my friends have actually asked Peter Todd about it, and he would just go, "Well, we need nation states. You know, we need nation states to make computers." And you know, he's like a massive neoliberal, genocidal, NATO, pro-NATO, etc. But the weird thing is, this is known fact.
Core V30 in the Knots v Core debate at the moment.
I'm not following that too closely. Yeah. But anyway, I just find it so strange that he's still invited to conferences. He's still invited to headline conferences. Everybody wants him as a keynote speaker. Nothing has happened as a consequence of this fact. Nobody has been. Everybody just kind of went, he's an agent. Okay.
So that makes sense that
he's still.
I mean, that makes sense that you were presenting him. I mean, that makes sense that you were presenting him as a agent, and they rephrased that and said that he's Satoshi Nakamoto. But Simon, have you got any other questions? Because we probably should be wrapping up sometime.
One more thread, just a quick answer. The Trump administration pardoned pretty much everybody, but put the Samurai Wallet guys in prison and didn't pardon them. That technology that they built was a wallet on top of CoinJoin. Was that your technology?
Yes. So actually, DarkFi, the project I'm working on now, in 2020, so 2019, I said I was in Syria. I came back, and then I literally flew straight from Syria to Osaka, DevCon, the Ethereum conference, and I was actually raising money. And what I was raising money for was a Bitcoin mixing wallet, like Samurai's doing. And I'm so lucky because I gradually started improving the design more and more, and I decided not to do the Samurai thing, but to do something more ambitious. So and I actually respect the Samurai guys. But just another note about that. Also, the Tornado Cash, you know, Roman Storm is relevant. I talk with him quite a bit as well. The fact that they pardoned a lot of other people, they legalized, you know, shitcoin casino type stuff, but they still got crusade against anonymity crypto software. It just goes to show what they're afraid of, and they're trying to frighten us into compliance, into backing off. But actually, it's a signal of where we need to push hardest, because that's where we push and where we can punch them that it hurts the most. We have to do it more, not less.
Okay, Solomon, I'm done. Amir, thank you for sharing. And again, I corrected the misinformation that I gave. I have no idea whether what you said is true or not, but I misrepresented what you did say. I corrected that, and I correct it here again.
Thank you very much. It's cool. It's no issue. Thank you.
Yeah, and look, I just want to thank Amir for coming on. Look, you've been on for 2 hours. You've answered every single question. The audience can decide. Sorry?
Time flies. Time flies.
Does fly, indeed. Yeah, and I'll let the audience decide whether they think that what you said is credible or not. I do still have question marks about a couple of things. It'd be great if you did have access to this forum, and it'd be great to have your business partner clarify what he was doing on Epstein Island. I think those would be 2 points of interest for me from this conversation. But other than that, I'll be honest with you, you have come across really genuine. You have come across as transparent, as honest as you can be. I want to be honest about that. And if I had to go on gut, which I don't really like going on gut, I do seem to believe a lot of what you said. But obviously, I can't base it on gut. You have to base it on the data and information.
Okay. Okay. I hope one day in the future we talk about real shit, politics.
Well, that's changing. Well, you're more than welcome to come on any of my shows, any of my spaces. That's literally what we do almost all day, is speak about geopolitics, speak about Zionism, speak about what's happening throughout the world, and try and fight against it. So that's something we do every day. That's what Ray's into as well. Cool. Yeah, Ray's great. Okay, thank you so much, Amir. Thank you, Simon, for joining. And obviously, it's on YouTube and it'll stay on there. There's no edits to this whatsoever. Amazing. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, guys. See you later. Thanks a lot. See you. Bye-bye.